meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, Redevelopment, Successor Agency, and Financing Authority. Our meeting tonight, pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, pursuant to which members of the Council and staff are participating in the meeting via live teleconference. Members of the public have been asked to participate via live stream, where the video may be watched at the city's website, right next to the agenda for this meeting, in order to reduce the spread of COVID-19, or to watch the meeting on Wave Cable Channel 20, and to submit testimony or other comments to the council in advance. Those comments are not limited to 3 minutes, and they don't need to be in written form. They can be in any submission format appropriate for acceptance by the city clerk on any of the agenda items that are available tonight. The clerk has transmitted copies of each one of the public communications that have been submitted to individual members of the council. They are also posted collectively, as all of the comments are together on the city's website right next to this agenda item and to the video screen. The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding approval of final agreement concluding real estate negotiations with the parties being Gale Overhouse, Lotus 33 Street LLP, and Rupesh Patel and Shirish Patel. No action was taken. To confer with our labor negotiator regarding labor negotiations with the West Sacramento Police Officers Association and Police Managers Association, and no action was taken. And with that, then we'll proceed to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. Madam Clerk, would you please note public comments that we received under item 1A?
For this item.
All right, thank you very much. And I believe we've received two comments, and I just wanted to know we received some documentary photos and other requests for some actions by Joan Macklis-Kritzman and some other residents, neighbors. And we'll refer those to the city manager for follow-up as well. And then from Leanne Provost or Lee Hicks and neighbors as well regarding the Allen Avenue project that was heard by the Planning Commission and is in the design review process. And I just note that item is not scheduled for council consideration. I know it can be both confusing and frustrating, the differences between local government and other levels of government. In the city government, the council does perform three distinct functions. The council is the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch of the city all at once. But those are still remain distinct functions. And with respect to review of compliance with the city's policies for development projects, or for a homeowner in the city that wants to add an additional bathroom or whatever to their home, the city and the council don't have the authority to make new legislative policy in reviewing those permit applications. And instead we follow a more judicial, quasi-judicial, adjudicatory framework. And in those frameworks, the council and commissions are not permitted to act in a legislative capacity. And that is why the item is not coming to the council directly from the Planning Commission as a legislative matter with respect to, is it a good project or not? That is no longer within the scope of the council. The only questions that are before the city are, does the applicant comply with the city's specific written requirements and regulations and rules. So we don't have that item before us tonight. All right, so with that, we'll then proceed to item 1A, which is council communications. Are there reports or other communications this evening? Councilmember Guerrero?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. On November 16th, the YOLO Habitat Conservancy board met, and we received the file year-to-date fiscal report, and we approved the Fifth Amendment to contract with the Urban Economics to increase contract amount by $10,000 for a contract maximum of $40,000. We also approved the contract amendments with On-Call Real Estate Acquisition Consultants Conservation Land Group, Dock Engineering, and Associates to extend the term for each of these contracts through June 30th, 2022, and to increase the contract amount for Conservation Land Group and Duncan Engineering by $20,000 for the contract maximum of $50,000. We also approved the response to the grand jury report regarding YOLO Habitat Conservancy. In addition, we approved the 2021 board meeting calendar to and established an executive committee so that there be flexible monthly meetings, specifically March and July. And the executive committee would meet instead. And we increased the executive director's expenditure authority limit from $5,000 to $25,000. We reviewed the advisory committee composition, and it was approved to ensure that our appointees are the voting member. And the recruitment process is to be established through the MADI Act and also by each jurisdiction. And we will be working collaboratively with the Habitat to establish the process to recruit an advisory committee member from West Sacramento. That concludes my report.
And other reports or communications from our liaison assignments, Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So I do have one update from Monday, November 9th, at a meeting of Yolo County Transportation District Board of Directors. And a few things of note. It's a pretty quiet agenda, but we did continue emergency authority to the executive director through January 31st. We also received an update on the financial status. You can imagine the district is still dealing with low revenues, fare box revenues, and others. But as I've been stating before, CARES Act money is carrying for sort of the backfill in, but it continues to struggle, but finding its way. So from a budgetary standpoint, so we got an update there. And then there was an item on YCTD is starting to look at some project nominations for the next round of SACOG competitive funding. There's some projects they have in mind. I urge them to reach out to the local agent, the agencies, member agencies of YCTD to make sure they are in coordination of any projects that might complement what they are looking to qualify for. So again, that's an area where hopefully they do reach out to our staff. And finally, we got an update on sort of the comprehensive operational analysis that's still, again, post-COVID. They sort of reset kind of the expectations and where the best areas would be to make sure service gets back to some level of normalcy and affordability given the constraints now. But they're continuing to work on that. Looks like December we'll get our first look at it. So that's all I had, and my reports. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ledesma. Councilmember Orozco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Regional County Sanitation Board met this morning, and we spent some time in closed session regarding a matter of legal counsel and existing litigation regarding Flatiron West Incorporated and the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District. In addition, we approved amendments to the legal services agreements with both Hanson Bridget as well as Nasaman LLP, and received a presentation from one of our directors to the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District Consolidated Ordinance. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of reports. First, I know the League of Cities is Mayor Pro Tem Sandin's assignment, but will be presenting tomorrow at the National League of Cities Summit. I'm actually already filmed the president. Omar, if you could join us later. We previously filmed the presentation, but tomorrow will be the workshop at the National League of Cities, and then we'll be taking live Q&A. And it's about the home run and efforts in leading cities across the country to create pathways into the middle class, and the work that we've been doing here in West Sacramento in that regard. Earlier this week, there was a national webinar on economic mobility as part of the DollarWise program, which is jointly sponsored by the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Bank of America. And what the council will recall, earlier this year, we were one of the 7 awardees across the country of the DollarWise innovation grants to support the work that we're doing in the home run as part of the digital badging efforts that we've been building out over the last several years. And so the webinar featured the efforts, our progress on that work. Our progress has been fits and starts this year, like everything else in 2020. And I'm very proud of our staff. We presented the webinar. Despite the lockdowns and the other economic impacts, we're able to achieve work-based learning experiences for almost as many students as last year. And that's remarkable because so many employers, I don't want to say the last thing on their mind, but certainly not the first thing on their mind this year has been how to make sure that they offer, high quality work-based learning opportunities for West Sacramento youth, but many of them did, and our staff did an outstanding job of creating alternatives. And as part of that digital badging effort, West Sacramento teenagers earned more than 300 digital badges that are markers of skills, of competencies, of qualifications that will unlock opportunities for them both immediately, but also for college, for career, and of course for the home run scholarship too. So really proud to present that earlier this week to the national webinar on this process. And then lastly, the SACOG equity. Diversity, equity, and inclusion work group met earlier this week and heard the preliminary results of a consultant report about SACOG as an organization and its efforts on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Obviously one of the major challenges with SACOG is it is not a diverse institution in its board, and that's a challenge to overcome because the SACOG board is appointed by its members, so partly the member agencies, whether they're in Rockland or Roseville or Folsom or elsewhere, haven't had the diverse representation themselves to send. And then in some cases when they have had it, they haven't sent it anyway. And so SACOG has been not a diverse board for many, many years. And so part of the effort here is to try to improve that diversity, but by building a pipeline as well. And West Sacramento has been an active partner in the regional academy that SACOG sponsors, where we have gotten a lot of young people engaged in region-wide issues for the first time ever that are also very diverse and very interested in getting involved in local regional affairs too. So that's part of the long-term play. There's some short-term strategies that are underway as well. So with that, I do have, we are winding down this 2-year session of the council, but just for schedule reasons, I have a couple of changes to our 1B assignments for the remaining for the term. So I'm going to nominate Councilmember Ledesma to switch with me and be the representative to SACOG, and I'll be the alternate simply for meeting attendance purposes for the remaining weeks. So I'm nominating Councilmember Ledesma for SACOG and myself as the alternate. Councilmember Ledesma to the River City Stadium Financing Authority, and Councilmember Orozco to replace Mayor Pro Tem Sandin on the Yolo County Housing Authority. So those are the nominations. Just want to make sure we have everybody that were in full attendance during this period. So those would be the nominations, and ask if there's a motion for their approval or otherwise.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Seeing no discussion, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on those appointments?
Yes, Councilmember Guerrero.
Abstain.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
And Mayor Cabalden.
Aye. Okay, thank you. That motion carries. That brings us to item 1C. We don't have appointments this evening. The council's leadership subcommittee, Mayor Pro Tem Sandin, would like to, and I would like to propose that we extend the deadline for applications to the city's boards and commissions. We are in I think what is an unprecedented situation in terms of vote counts and what have you for city elections. So there are many residents who might wish to serve in city government in a variety of voluntary capacities for boards and commissions who simply haven't applied because they don't know what the council is or what the direction is going to be. And so we have fewer applicants than we typically do for the coming term. And so our Member Pro Tem and I are recommending that we extend the deadline to December 12th to assure that folks have the opportunity, citizens have the opportunity to know what the composition of the council is, and therefore decide whether or not to submit their applications. We certainly hope they will, under any circumstances, but it's entirely understandable that some folks would make a decision based on the direction of the city. And so to maximize that opportunity and to maximize the number of applicants, our proposal is to extend that deadline to December 11th. It's not in the ordinance that it's in an earlier date. That's simply been a matter of practice that was agreed to with the city clerk's office and the city manager's office. But if there's not an objection to that, then we'll proceed with the December 11th date. All right, great, thank you. It will require, a rapid, expedited consideration and review of those applications when they do come in. So in order to maintain the flow of business through the city's commissions and boards. So there will be a bit of a price to be paid by members of this council that who review all the applications. But I'm glad that we're all in agreement that it's better to have more people have the opportunity to apply and to be able to participate. All right, so with that, then we're going to proceed to our presentations item. The first is item number 2, which is a presentation of a proclamation recommending November as Native American Heritage Month. Assistant City Manager Berlin. Megan?
Mayor, I'm not sure if anybody.
Yeah, I don't think it's just me, Megan. I think you're muted. Sorry.
Your lighting is on point, but your microphone. No.
Still can't hear me?
There you go.
Oh, okay. Sorry. It said I wasn't muted. I apologize. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Tonight we have a proclamation recognizing November as Native American Heritage Month. Native American Heritage Month was first declared on August 3rd, 1990 by President George Bush. This celebratory month aims to provide a platform for Native people in the United States of America to share their culture, traditions, music, crafts, dance, and ways and concepts of life. Here in West Sacramento, the city and elected officials work to maintain a meaningful government-to-government relationship with the Yoshadihi-Wintun Nation and consistently works in partnership to address the needs of the community. As you know, in 2018, the City Council voted unanimously to approve the transfer of a 43-acre parcel of riverfront property to the California State Parks to allow the state to build the California Indian Heritage Center. This center will encourage residents and visitors alike to learn about the traditions and rich history of Native people year-round. Here joining us on the Zoom call tonight, we have Omar Carrillo, who is the Director of Government Relations for Yoshadihi-Wintun Nation. And I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, before we turn it over to Omar, who, as you say, is also a resident and a public servant and official here in our own community as well, let's ask first if there's a motion on the proclamation.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Roscoe and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Sandine. So it's her last meeting, maybe her last proclamation. So let's give her this one. And Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll on the proclamation.
Certainly. Mayor Pro Tem Sandine.
Aye.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Aye.
And Mayor Cabalden.
Aye. All right, so that motion carries. The proclamation is adopted. So Omar, let's turn it over to you. And thanks you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation to participate this evening. So Mayor, Council, thank you for the recognition and opportunity to say a few words. Mayor Anthony Roberts was unable to join us this evening, but I'm honored to receive the Native American resolution on behalf of Yoshadihi-Wintun Nation and on behalf of their sister tribes, Kachildihi and Klutzeldihi. So as you know, Yoshadihi has a deep connection to West Sacramento. They've lived in these lands for thousands of years. There are 109 federally recognized tribes in the state of California with unique cultures, languages, and traditions, each contributing to the rich diversity for all of us to celebrate. Today, we celebrate the perseverance, history, and many contribution of California tribes. Thank you very much for this time, and on behalf of the Yochadihi Winter Nation Tribal Council.
Thank you, Mr. Carrillo. Councilmember Orozco.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to recognize Omar Carrillo and thank him for being here tonight. Mr. Carrillo has had a fantastic presence in the city of West Sacramento, both as a representative of the tribe, but also as a local community leader. As the mayor said, he has served in various capacities, and I enjoy seeing him in support of so many things in our city, a lot of which have to do with our children. In a previous life, I worked for the Office of Management and Budget and budgeted for not only tribal colleges, but also Native American education and teacher professional development, and did field work during my master's degree program on the Navajo Nation, and learned a lot about the history and culture of Navajo, the struggles that they experience on the tribe, and also the history that's rich, Native American or Navajo code talkers, for example. Those are parts of our history that aren't recognized as much as we do recognize other parts. And also, as the representative for the Lieutenant Governor, Cruz Bustamante, when I came back to California, I was in charge of his Native American tribal relationships and the liaison between our office and all the tribes. We don't spend enough time recognizing the contributions and celebrating the culture and heritage of remarkable tribes and the people that represent these nations. And I'm proud of our city for taking the time tonight to do that. American Indians and Alaska Natives have contributed so tremendously to the history nationwide. And Yoshadahi Winton Nation is one of those organizations that continues to give back quietly. They have contributed so significantly to, even local efforts with the Yolo County Children's Alliance, coat drives, food drives, things that deal with young, underprivileged children and communities. And there are a lot in West Sacramento. So it's with great pride that I have the opportunity to see this presentation tonight. And I'm grateful for my colleagues in our city and people like Mr. Carrillo and his colleagues who recognize these tremendous contributions. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? I would just add, I certainly second everything that Councilmember Orozco has said in both words and in spirit, and also to emphasize the role that Yochadahi has played in our community as a force for environmental sustainability, for public safety, and just to be very, as an employer of so many of our residents here in West Sacramento. And not just as, like somebody who writes a paycheck, but we wouldn't have had so many of the key transit routes in the city, whether it's to the airport or even to Cache Creek, for example, without the active support of Yochadahi and the vision for what it means to be a strong employer. And Omar was telling me, not too long ago, that even during the pandemic, when the casino, as an example, has not been at either open or at full capacity, that they have maintained their commitment to to all the employees. And so many of those folks live in our community, and their families depend on those jobs and on the family relationships that they have with Yochadahi. So I just want to be add my voice to the specific contributions of this tribe, which has been so important countywide, and particularly in our own community. So thanks so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. Councilmember Guerrero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to add, Mr. Carrillo, I just want to thank you very much for all your contributions to our community, also for our firefighters and the partnership. This has been an incredible year of teamwork, working in partnership with all of our local firefighters in our region. And that has made a huge impact in helping fire victims, providing the shelter and the food and the support for the last few years. So just that contribution has been tremendous, along with everything else that has been said tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Omar, always good to see you. And just again, thank you for all your contributions and leadership in our community, but especially as a board member of YCTD, I know the contributions the tribe makes to making sure people get around, as the mayor mentioned. And so it is a month to recognize all the contribution of Native Americans. And I just want to say thank you for being here. Said good to see you, but just thank you for all the contributions and being here to represent the tribe. So thank you.
I'll make sure I report back to the tribal council all your kind words. Thank you so much.
All right, terrific. Have a good evening, Omar. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's move then to item 3, which is presentation of a proclamation recognizing the achievements of Councilmember Beverly Babs Sandine. And Ms. Berlin, do you have a presentation, or shall we just take it away? Let's just take it away. We don't need staff to do this one. They have their own kudos to be given. So first of all, is there a motion on the proclamation?
I'll move the recommended action.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, I think Councilmember Ledesma made the motion. I believe Councilmember Guerrero was second this time. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on item 3?
Yes, Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma.
So clarification, if I say no, will she stay? I don't think.
No.
Is that a yes, Councilmember?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandine.
It's strange to vote aye, but I guess. Thanks.
Mayor Cabalden.
Aye. All right, so that motion carries unanimously. Councilmember Orozco.
Is this time for comment, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I left my microphone on, so I haven't completely collected my thoughts, but I do want to remark upon, this bittersweet moment. Mayor Pro Tem Sandine was one of the first council members I had the opportunity to meet, and certainly the first woman, local leader who I met for the first time pushing a cart at Safeway when Safeway was open. And I knew we had a lot in common because we both had our Safeway apps out and we were looking for the best deals. And that was someone who I knew that I had to get to know. And later on in life, I was surprised that I actually had an opportunity to get to know her in a different capacity, both as a colleague and someone who I had the great fortune of campaigning with. Beverly Sandine is one of the most thoughtful and compassionate people, one of the best leaders when it comes to not only being intelligent, but having a heart of gold. And she has done so much for this community, both as a council member, as Mayor Pro Tem, but just as a regular neighbor. She's one of the first persons that will open her pocketbook to make a donation to a local cause. When there's businesses that are starting up, she goes out in full support to be the first person in line to order what's being sold or make a contribution toward the effort of making sure that our businesses thrive here. She is the council member extraordinaire when it comes to attending meetings and making sure that all of us are informed about what's going on, not only in our city, but in our region. And not only is she loved by so many, it's really clear to see why she's loved by so many, but she knows everyone and everyone knows her, and those who know her fall in love very quickly. Babs has been instrumental in my leadership as a woman. It's hard. Many people don't recognize what happens outside these meetings when we're not in these little squares, the burdens that many women have to carry because there are so many things that fall on our shoulders and so many things that we often have to deal with that other people might not have to carry. And so it's great to have her support as a new council member when I began to navigate this whole environment. But also as someone who said, you know what, you should step forward fearlessly. She is a member of and graduate of American Leadership Forum, so it's in her blood, and she's, you know, very inspirational. I know that the proclamation probably highlights this, but, you know, she is an awardee of Women Who Mean Business, and how appropriate, because she does. And she was recognized for her civic leadership, not once, but also twice by the mayor, as well as Volunteer of the Year. And I serve with her on the Rotary Club. She's in the Centennial, I'm in the Mighty, but we're all one family. And we have built, we've renovated schools and built homes as part of Habitat for Humanity's Women's Build. And I you know, as someone, like I said earlier, that has campaigned with a person, you know, that some of the hardest times you go through are the times when you see the best of the person's character. And Babs, you are a true Girl Scout. You are someone who is going to be missed tremendously, not only by me but my colleagues, but I can also say from staff, because you're the first person that always says thank you. And gosh, you know, I want to change my vote to no, so you'll stay. But I'll do my best by just saying that you will be greatly missed. And so thank you for your service.
Thank you, Councilmember Orozco. Other comments? Councilmember Ledesma?
Thank you. I don't really know where to start. I think I'm in a little bit of denial still that I have to. This is your last meeting with us, Bab. So it's just been a wonderful journey to be on with you on this council and watch you with such dignity and such passion and compassion for our community just grow. And I've known you before that. I've known you when we started on Planning Commission together, and I've seen you in our community as Councilmember Orozco pointed out. You're always the one that came to the OOG plays or whatever to see my kids and other kids perform or dance, whatever they did, and support the fundraisers and support everything else. And so for all that, you know, it's not goodbye to you by any means. You'll be in our community, and you'll be our friend and our neighbor always. But we will miss your voice on council. I will miss your voice on council. And I think I couldn't think of a better word or description of you, as Councilman Orozco has pointed out. You are the consummate Girl Scout. I mean, say that with the duty you serve with, the sense of duty, the sense of professionalism, the sense of trying to pick all those up around you and do the job the right way. This is, you know, serving on council is a tremendous privilege for us. It's mainly a volunteer work for us, as all 5 of us know. We don't, the $300 a month, you know, is a lot of, I think the city gets every ounce of it from us, every penny of it from us. And you've more so. I mean, you have been so present, a good representative for our city. I think that a lot of folks may never know how much you have dug into issues, primarily for the last few years as our designee on flood issues at Wasafka. And joining you for the last years, I have seen you at work in the command of the issues. And it is, like I said, that's the work many people in our community don't see. And to see how thorough you address the issues, I want to dig in. How much you and I have served together, and you've supported me and been the backup on Transit District. So thank you. I'm sure YCTD folks, staff, thank you as well for all your service and dedication to it. I know this past year you helped us with the visioning project, and which was a big add, having your voice there. But I'll just miss you on the dais, and I'm sorry can't do this in person. because you're always the one looking to try to keep us on course, to keep our moral compass. I don't think any of us have doubt that, but you're always that one person on who was just generally good and wanted to do good for the community. And I just admire you so much for that. And I will miss your voice here. I've been serving with you for over 10 years on Planning Commission and here. So just thank you for everything. And I will be seeing you in the community, no doubt, but just thank you for all your service.
Councilor Guerrero.
Well, Babs, this is heartbreaking, I have to say. I heard Cindy Tuttle wanted to join us live and sing you a song, just a wonderful person that you are. And so just proud to be able to work side by side with you on the Planning Commission. When we did work together, you've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy. My observations of everything you've done prior to, when I got on council, and I got your assignments and all the words of, praise and what you've done, the major contributions you've made on many of the board assignments, and all your support for me, over the years, to be in leadership. You've never given up. Your heart, your thoughts, your compassion, your understanding of where we're all at never has, wavered. You've been very strong about that. And I know, I definitely want to make sure you come back in some way, to continue to help us, because you're going to leave a huge void and all the work we have to do on council, because you've carried a lot of it. And just even, outside of what's going on, to support our nonprofit organizations that, carry additional work for our most vulnerable populations, the food bank and Habitat and all the other organizations that you've been out there, just helping them continue to thrive so that they can support our residents and our community overall. It's just not even YOLO or West Sac, it's our entire region. And I know you're going to continue at that. That's always been, a part of your heart. And, a lot of us love you, and we really are going to miss you being here with us. So, don't give up. You should always come back if you can. All right. Well, so just know that we'll miss you over the dais, and I'll be reaching out for consultations, for your thoughts.
Babs, or Councilmember Pro Tem Sandine. I still remember like it was yesterday, the day that I asked you to serve on the Planning Commission and then made the appointment at the City Council. And none of my colleagues from back then are still here, but they could only describe me as bouncing off the ceiling, beaming with pride and joy that our community had just gotten a planning commissioner, Dr. Beverly Sandine, author of research and studies on transportation access for seniors and disabled individuals and what communities could do best for them. The head of the UC Davis Alumni Association, soon to be the vice chancellor of UC Davis. This was an extraordinary, and a woman for the first time that had this pedigree that was beyond comparison in the history of the city and on the Planning Commission, and the pride that it represented. But then to see you sit down in that first commission meeting with Chris and with others, with the strength and the humility that have been the hallmark of your leadership all the way through. By strength, I think it's really the strength that it requires to be what has been already described by all of my colleagues so richly, to be so caring and compassionate and empathic, and also to be very vision and values oriented, to know what's up, to be able to negotiate, to be able to fight, to do all the things and still have the kind of grace and to convey that grace, to model the grace that inspires that love by others and that respect by others. And of all the folks I've ever served with, I've never, ever ran into a single person in the streets of Sacramento that said, you know, I hate that. And I love that entire city council, except for Bab Sandine. You're the only one that know that everyone at the end of the day says, look, maybe I didn't get my way, but she heard me. She listened, and she thought about it, and she cares. And that means so much. And I remember a couple of years back when inevitably somebody didn't check their sexism at the door and said, well, you know, the mayor and Councilmember Sandine, that was both the same, and she just does whatever she said, whatever he says. And we both laughed about it for different reasons. You laughed because you knew it wasn't true, and I laughed because I knew it was the opposite. That will surprise very few people. I'm often running around with, here's a new idea. Let's try this. Let's do this. How about that? What if we crush our opposition across the river? What if we accomplish this? And one of the critical roles that Councilmember Sandine, that Mayor Pro Tem Sandine, that Bab Sandine has played in the city has been to say, hey, is that really the right thing? Not just is it the right policy, not is it the right action, but would we want to be treated that way? Is that the kind of city we want to be? Is it the right time? Is it the right moment? And so often we've all looked to your leadership quietly behind the scenes and say, no, maybe it's not the right thing. Maybe it's not the right moment. And your capacity to convey that, not in a sense of conservatism around what could be accomplished, but just the clear-headedness and as Councilmember Orozco says, the constant compassion and strength that guide your work has been so powerful in shaping what happens in our city, even when it's not your name on it, even when you're not the one giving the speech. You just cannot look around our city without seeing the results of your work. What you did with the AARP age-friendly task force, it's just extraordinary. You know, you signed up for the work because you were asked, and because you had done your graduate work in the same issues. You signed up because you were asked, like so many other times. That you stepped forward, you did the work, and made it real. And then we went on to be recognized internationally for what you had done in our city. And so when I see a Via van drive around, or I see folks in the senior center, at the community center, enjoying a class or an activity, it's you. You are behind so many of the smiling faces of the folks who got the services that they needed, or the folks who just didn't have the city to be one more thing that they worried about in their daily life during 2020. They have you to thank for that. And then having served for this last year with you on the COVID subcommittee together, where we've been meeting, it seems like every day to work together to try to manage the hardest crisis ever. I saw the steely strength behind the leader again, right when we needed it most. But I also want to say, for those who are able to see this later, that it hasn't been easy. And, watching you be a human being, like all of us in this role, when, we make decisions about a project here or a policy there, and our lifelong friendships end up on the line, and our neighbors don't want to say hi in the supermarket, that this is a hard job. And yes, as Councilmember Ledesma says, it is a tremendous honor, but it also can come at a tremendous personal cost. And I know you have felt that. We all have in 2020 for sure. And you persevered. And you've always asked just one question: what's the right thing for West Sacramento? And you've made the sacrifices along the way in order to experience the joy and the sense of accomplishment that we've all shared together. But it's never always easy. It's never always glamour and glory on the West Sacramento City Council. And you have modeled what it takes to be a leader. And then your decision I'm not voting no, because your decision to retire from the council is one that I think we all understand and respect, not just in our city, but in city halls all around the country. And you have done such great service to our community. You've left West Sacramento in such a better place than it was when you arrived, both as a citizen and as a council member, and you've kept us safe during the year when we needed the very most. So thank you. It's been a great honor of my life to serve with you, alongside you in all of these capacities. Thank you for your tremendous service, and best wishes in the future. Mayor Pro Tem Sandine for the rebuttal.
thank you. Thank you all so much. This seems so indulgent, and all your words mean so much to me. It has been a tremendous honor to serve with you for this great city, and to work together with you to create such a special place. We have an incredible, dedicated staff and leadership team here, and I'm so grateful to have worked with the staff team here, and of course with all of you. We're blessed with passionate and engaged residents, business owners that believe in us, and I feel like I've just played a small part, but it's been incredibly meaningful to me, and I look forward to supporting the city in new and different ways, and to cheering the council on and the city team on from the sidelines. I've as you know, I think you all know I've fallen in love with this place that we call our home. I love its history, what it's become, what we've done together, and I'm excited for what it will become. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to serve with you. And again, thank you for the kindness. We have a huge agenda ahead of us this evening, and I'm grateful to have these moments, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, pre-COVID, this would have been time for us to take a recess and share some refreshments and cookies with one another, and probably a few hugs or between, with members of the public and the staff. Obviously, we can't do any of that, but we can in our hearts, and I think both in our own words. And we spoke on our own behalf, but I know our staff, all of them feel the same way, if not more so, about you, and appreciate you, and for the leader that you've been, and also how you've supported and unleashed their talent and their commitment and their dedication to the city, and always lifted them up without exception. So if there was a seventh box up on the screen tonight and it represented the staff, I know that they would have that to say to you as well.
Mr. Mayor, may I add one thing as well? I'm sorry. Just Babs, obviously, thank you again, but our spouses and our partners have played a big role in supporting us. So I know Marty watches these meetings. He's one of the thousands of people that watches every week. And so I know he's made a tremendous sacrifice as well, giving you up on Wednesday nights and Monday nights for meetings or whatever it was. So I'm glad you guys are getting your time together. So Marty Swingle, thank you for your letting us borrow Babs as well. And glad you have her back and you guys can enjoy life and get in the community. So I just want to say thank you, Marty, for letting us borrow Babs for the last 6 years.
Thanks, Chris, for that. You may thank you, or maybe not. We'll see. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Then with that, we're going to proceed to the consent agenda, which is items 4 through 19. And just we have from the city clerk and city manager, we have a set of modifications to a couple of the items to 14, 16, I think that's, and 14, 16, and 19 as well that have been provided under separate coverage to the council. So are there items for separate consideration or to remove from the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item number 12 and 15.
All right, then with 12, we need to take off 13 also, which is the green zones because they're related to one another. All right, any others? Okay, then let's proceed to those items. The first is item 12, which is consideration of a streetcar service memorandum of understanding for development and of an operating and maintenance agreement with the Sacramento Regional Transit District. Councilmember Guerrero.
Thank you. I have a few questions about this particular item. some concerns came up as I was reading it. Initially, I saw that it was a memorandum of understanding for development of an operating and maintenance agreement. And I figured there would be a little more detail fleshed out in here. And some of the detail that was not included was an analysis of the fare box, to include in the operation and maintenance. We would have some kind of idea of how much, we would get. And especially after hearing Councilmember Ledesma's report from Yolo County Regional Transit, how it's really low, and we are receiving coronavirus relief funding to maintain that operating. And in planning for the future, we know that it will be, post-COVID, but in planning for the future and looking at other mobility options, and furthermore, reading the commitment that is here before us, Sacramento has not complied or not committed to their share yet. There's 150,000 in 2020, and they are also supposed to add another 560,000 needed to work through the FTA's project development review process, as well as the loan they were offered through SAC-RT, which they have not even accepted. And so we're talking about an O&M, that is not including them. It references other potential partners. And in the O&M, SAC-RT is not going to take responsibility for any overage. And so I'm a little concerned about that. Like, who would take responsibility for that? I know there's going to be a follow-up report. And in reading further, that there will be a report coming back once the O&M is completed. And that's something that I think is probably more responsible on our part, to take a look at a framework, not just a framework, but a little more, fleshed out details. So that would lead me to recommend the alternative number 3, and to delay action until we have more information, because I think that would be more responsible on the part of all the funding that is needed. We are going to contribute $25 million, but I don't see the partnership where the rail line is primarily in Sacramento City. I don't see the partnership there in Sacramento City. And in conversations with incoming Councilmember-elect Katie Valenzuela, which is her district, she has other ideas about what she sees in transportation for her district. And this streetcar project is not on the list. And so with that, I'm thinking it's not going to receive the future support. I prefer to see that if we're going to be recommending something, but in the report written here, I don't see that commitment among all the partners. And it is very concerning to see that this would burden West Sacramento, not only with the $25 million that we're contributing, and in the future with the O&M costs, which we don't know what those will be.
All right, Mr. McCoy, I don't know if there were questions in that you wanted to answer, or simply if it's the council discussion item, that's fine too. But if there were specific questions that you wanted to take up from the Councilmember Guerrero.
This is Jason McCoy, Supervising Transportation Planner. I did not hear any questions there, but I'm happy to respond to any questions that you might have.
Thank you. No, I think you did well in explaining the information in the report. And I'm just referencing the alternative recommendation, which is number 3, which is to delay hearing this and not take action tonight.
Okay, thank you. I'll just say on this. I mean, I actually mentioned earlier the executive, legislative, and judicial roles that the council plays, and one of them is the executive role, which is once a policy decision has been made, then we have to begin to execute sort of every week to implement those decisions. And unlike in the Congress, which will take up repeal of the ACA every other day until they, because they voted against it. The members who didn't want it the first time want to keep bringing up the vote over and over and over and over again. that a city can't operate that way because we've made commitments and we have to make commitments, and there has to be an understanding by our partners, whether that's in this case the Federal Transit Administration or RT or the City of Sacramento or Congresswoman Matsui, that if we say something on Wednesday, that the thing that we will say next Wednesday isn't the opposite. And so that whenever, you know, in those instances where I've been on the short end of a council vote on something that I've disagreed on, whatever the decision is, then it's my responsibility to help to execute in that space. And that's the only way that city government can work. If every decision is always a battleground over the same decision again, then you can't implement projects that require 27 or 57 or 157 different steps. So I think just so directionally, nothing has changed from the decision that was made previously on the project. We committed to do this particular set of agreements. We absolutely want to be in the line already when the Congress and the new president of the United States are looking at a new stimulus package, at a new version of the HEROES Act, but more broad, that devotes money to transportation. If we were to not have our project fully as far as it can go at that point, then shame on us, because we will be giving up $100 million of federal funding for local transportation purposes. This isn't the construction project that's being construction contract that's being let tonight. Tonight is simply the memorandum that guides how we work together with our partners on that project as we go forward. So any additional contingencies or eventualities that may arise, this is precisely the process that is needed in order to deal with those. And when the two cities adopted the action 2 months ago, it was based on our mutual agreement to produce this MOU with each other and with SAC-RT. And so I think our staff's done precisely what they were asked to do in terms of coming forward with an agreement that implements the council's action and the hard-fought action at Sacramento RT, and it's at the Sacramento at the Sacramento City Council as well. And so I'm fully supportive of moving forward with this tonight, knowing that we will have additional checkpoints and items coming up on streetcar for months and months and months and months, perhaps. Or we will get a word from FTA that we don't have a project, but there's really no reason for us to shoot ourselves in the foot when we are in the process of trying to achieve full FTA sign off in order to proceed with this grant funding. This agreement doesn't itself appropriate funds. It doesn't make those commitments in that space. We already voted before to make some initial commitments in that space. This is really about the legal agreements that replace the Joint Powers Authority agreement that we had previously. There has to be something. Otherwise, if we don't have an agreement at all, then we have there's a project that still exists. The project from the federal government's perspective is an RT project, and the project doesn't go away. It's just we don't have a role in its management and governance and operations. So the MOU is critical to preserving West Sacramento's authority, autonomy, in our role in the governance and the control of this project as we go forward. So, Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to echo some of that, but recognize that this has been a priority for the city before I started on council, and voters have again made a decision towards this transit solution and the need for transit. And this I think, regardless of kind of where the Sacramento support is, I know it's been there in the past. It hasn't been perfect, but I think there is a commitment between SAC-RT, its board members, its and members, the mayor of Sacramento, and others that have said that to keep this project moving forward. It was a real commitment, and especially with the federal government, as you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, about making this commitment about it is a good project. So much so before the SAC-RT vote, the regional director of FTA called to congratulate SAC-RT for getting it on their agenda. They believe, even in this administration, the outgoing one believed in it. So it's something that I have been a long proponent of. I think transit, I understand the issue with YCTD transit funding But that doesn't, to me, that is not a change from a commitment to transit, period. Having the ability to connect a light rail project and connecting West Sacramento to a broader regional transit system, be it here, the light rail, possibility of SAC-RT expanding that service into Yolo County is something that was broadly and is supported by our partners at YCTD, the chair and fellow board members. This is a hugely important project that has ramifications for decades in Yolo County for the possibility of light rail throughout West Sacramento, as well as in the rest of Yolo County. So in my mind, this is very much us holding us to his commitment, and I have every intent of continuing to see this through. And again, we're playing for the long game here. The good news is, as you pointed out, a new president is coming in who we know, I believe, will have the right values for continuing to promote transit of this kind. And we need to be ready to move forward with them. And we're at the precipice of bringing. A lot of residents have asked me the recognition that this is, yes, it's labeled a streetcar project, and folks have said, why can't we get light rail? This is light rail. This is absolutely the foothold of light rail into our community. And as in Sacramento, you built lines, the initial lines, and lines got built from there. We get no choices in this if there's no light rail crossing a bridge. And so I think we move forward on this. I think the MOU is what SAC-RT asked us to do, is pull together and try to get some framework to how we work. And I think we're continuing in that implementation. So again, I appreciate staff's work on this, working with SAC-RT, and we'll continue to make sure we move forward. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Also note that the Associate FDA Administrator that was the lead on this project at the outset, that really helped us in the early stages, is on the President-elect's transition leadership team for the Department of Transportation. And so this is definitely one of these issues where continuing the course that we've begun with not the current administration, but the prior administration, through this current administration into the next administration is key. It's key not just for the funding that we're going for, but also any future requests that we're going to be making before the Department of Transportation of the federal government. Member Sandine, and then we'll turn to Councilmember Guerrero as well.
Thank you. I was seeing this item as coming from our direction. So taking this forward was moving the direction of our council forward. So that's when I was reading this item, that is how, that was the lens I was reading it through. And I want to thank Mr. McCoy for the work and for the collaboration to continue what we had.
All right, Councilmember Guerrero.
Thank you. I do have a question for Mr. McCoy. Is this agreement going to come back for final approval?
Yes, the memorandum, this item before you right now is a framework and a memorandum of understanding with Sacramento Regional Transit that sets the parameters for us to actually develop the operations and maintenance agreement. So within that O&M agreement, it will be coming back to the City Council. The requirement is that the requirement of the Sacramento Regional Transit Board was that the MOU be executed between the City of West Sacramento and SAC-RT prior to obtaining the Small Starts Grant Agreement with the Federal Transit Administration. So I'm anticipating that you'll be seeing this item sometime around probably August 2021. We were anticipating to get a Small Starts Grant Agreement in September. Of course, the longer things delay, the more that they push out. And at this point, based on conversations I had with Sacramento Regional Transit today, we're looking more along the lines of March 2022 to receive our grant agreement with the Federal Transit Administration. However, the FTA has said that's not a problem, that because we were in the pipeline previously, that we are more than likely going to be authorized to extend that period beyond the September 2021 deadline. I have asked Regional Transit to provide that in writing from the Federal Transit Administration, and I have a meeting set up for tomorrow to discuss that further.
And if I could chime in really quick, and Jason, to confirm this, I believe there's an interim step may require additional budget appropriation to get us to that point. So there may be a future item for that as well.
That's correct. We have right now the mechanism that we have for payment of work, consultant work to regional transit is done through the JPA. So once the JPA gets dissolved, which was part of some of the actions that were happening between City of Sacramento and Sacramento Regional Transit District, we're going to need to develop another mechanism for payment. So that means that we're going to have to review the budget appropriation and that mechanism in order to continue proceeding with consultant engineering work.
And as far as cost, do you think they'll be tied down? They'll be like set?
Yeah, at this point, we still have the total cost of the project, including the work that was already expended on the original streetcar project, totaling $130 million for the 1.5 track mile segment. It is important to note that this is just a first step to getting light rail into West Sacramento. So just as it was with the original streetcar project, there is always the need to go out to bid and to receive those bids from various engineering consultants and construction management companies that can tell us, here's what we can build for which amount of money. You may recall that the last time when the original streetcar project moved forward, it did come in, the bids came in significantly over budget. There were a number of reasons for that, some of which were considered to be onerous restrictions in the city of Sacramento for traffic control. We had talked about addressing that by reducing some of those restrictions. Some of the other restrictions were that work could only take place at night, or during certain times, so pulling back some of those restrictions. As well as some of the requirements that Sacramento Regional Transit had. If we were able to address those, then the likelihood of us coming in budget is much greater than the original streetcar project.
And just one last note on that, it's already been said, but part of staff strategy between now and then is to, given the new administration coming in, our government affairs manager remarked that it's probably the most friendly administration to rail since the Transcontinental Railroad. So we want to definitely take advantage of that and hopefully use it as an opportunity. Like in the early years of the Biden administration, there was additional money available for transit projects to hopefully reduce the risk of having a funding gap by seeking other funding. So that would be our plan between now and receiving the full funding agreement.
I think you're referring to the Obama administration, right? You're on mute now, but
did I say Biden? Sorry.
You did, yeah.
Yeah, I meant the early years of the Obama administration. Yes. There was an urban circulator program and other funding sources.
Yeah, he's the one that got us into all of this. All right. Okay, and then just on item 13, just to point out that the green zones that are proposed were drawn on the basis of our transit network, including the streetcar project, which is why I pulled 13 as well, because without 12, 13 we might need to revisit. But if so, we just to draw that connection, we can't move forward with 13 in its full form if we don't proceed on the item 12 project itself. Councilmember Guerrero, did you have a comment on item 13?
I would just recommend that we take a look at alternative, modes of transportation to address item 13, supportive of the item, but something that, we can expand on and is more cost friendly. So something that we can achieve, even at a shorter time frame. This streetcar project's been lingering for quite a few years, so something that we can move up a little faster as well.
Yeah, that's not really possible for item 13. Item 13, the SACOG transit corridors and everything else are specifically about these modes. And I just want to point out, we have for the last 3 years been in conjunction with the City of Sacramento and Congresswoman Matsui and SACOG, examining a wide variety of their alternatives. When the bids came back on the streetcar project originally over budget, Mr. McCoy will recall, we asked him and a team of staff to do the impossible, which was tell us what the next 5 years of transportation looks like. Can we get flying cars or automated cars? We were one of the first in the region to demo with Councilmember Ledesma and YCTD, the self-driving shuttles along the waterfront. There is and has been quite a bit of work done on alternative modes, but there isn't a magical set of them out there just waiting to be deployed that are better and that don't depend on some backbone transit service like the streetcar project provides. So it's very clear that what's needed today isn't a New York or Paris style subway system where you have heavy rail going all over the place, but these sort of backbone rail corridors are continue to be seen among transportation professionals and transportation innovators even as central to the effectiveness of whether it's rideshare or other kinds of alternative modes of transportation. And so it's a both and situation, but for item 13, the metrics are related to specific modes, including transit, including microtransit as well, but including fixed rail and bus transit lines.
If I can just add, Mr. Mayor, on that, I think you're right, because they've got to work together. They're all complementary, right, in nature, and how they service the community, but also help other important initiatives or values we have, including climate change. I think it's one of the things that the Green Zones is trying to achieve, right? Vehicle miles, VMT. So again, it's just your point is well taken, and the streetcar separately has been built into many of our plans already on the waterfront. So it's just more the reason that this is an important part of it.
All right, thank you. Then item 5. Oh, Councilmember Roscoe, I'm sorry. Did your mic go on?
I've gone back and forth as whether or not I wanted to comment. I just, everything that I think has been said is important, and we've talked about this on multiple occasions. I just think when I envision what I want for my city, I think of why it is that I'm sitting here in this meeting in the first place. And it's the most valuable resource we have are the kids in our community and what we're leaving for them. We can't continue business as usual. Even my kids are smart enough to know that if we do that, then we're not going to have anything left for them. And so, to think about not considering other ways to do business. When we talk about affordable housing and we talk about all these things that we want to do for people in our, in our community, disadvantaged or otherwise, as well as environmentally forward-thinking moves, we have to consider them together. And I can't. We could sit here and argue about streetcar or all these, the cost of this and that. But for when I'm talking about making a bold move for the future of our city and moving people to different places, whether that be Folsom or somewhere in the center of Sacramento, so people can get out of these dang cars because they can't afford a hybrid or an electric car right now, but they can't afford that fee to get on a light rail and take themselves somewhere else without completely polluting and leaving a larger carbon footprint. Well, then I'm for that. I'm for all the people who can now afford to get places they otherwise couldn't because they can't afford the darn insurance or the parking space or the car for that matter. And, I'm all about trying to do something that's good for our people and good for public health and good for the quality of life and economic opportunity for all the residents in West Sacramento. So that's nothing more profound than what's already been said, but climate change is a big deal. And to me, the streetcar represents a huge move in that direction and changing the course of our future. So for that reason, I'm in support of moving forward with this item.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Roscoe. And thanks, Jason. So we'll proceed next to item 15, which is consideration of affordable housing agreement with Jefferson Village at Southport, LLC for the Jefferson Village Apartments. Councilmember Roscoe? I'm sorry, Councilmember Guerrero?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to just thank you, Raul, for this affordable housing project. I know there were a lot of partners involved, and making it all, weaving the resources together, making it happen is pretty significant. I just had a couple of questions. There seems to be a lot of, housing that's going to be providing support for families. And I know our schools are pretty impacted right now. So thinking about the future, looking at where our kids are going to be, where the kids of this housing is going to be placed. And in addition to that, resources within our region. So, there'll be additional calls for services. What thinking around that was prepared in developing this proposal today.
Just so that I understand your question correctly, you're talking about the impacts of the proposed Jefferson Village apartments on housing and other services?
Yeah, there'll be more calls, for example, for firefighter services. As you take a look at, construction in the future, usually a developer contributes, and probably not in this case, given the type of project it is. So do you foresee any impact? I know you kind of got a better sense of the landscape and when things are happening as development is happening, and maybe you see that there's a way to fit things in from another project and it's not described here. So do you foresee the resources being available for this, for the individuals that are going to be moving in and utilizing our additional services like schools and other, like, for example, more firefighter calls to service?
So, I can tell you that as part of the development process that every developer goes through with our planning department, they look at some of those impacts and part of the fees that they have to pay are related to school impact fees, park impact fees, things of that nature. So I would assume that those impacts were taken into account when the project was being reviewed. Unfortunately, I was not part of that process. Typically, we don't deal with that type of the process in a development project. That's typically dealt with the planning department and the planning department staff. But again, those types of impacts are typically reviewed during the project review and the assessments that are made on the projects.
Yeah, Raul, can we turn to since this is not the subject of the item tonight, could we just quickly turn to the city manager on this issue?
Sure. Yeah, and Raul was given the right description there. I'd take it even a further step back. We have a general plan that lays out land use, and we have zoning, and we have entitled sites that have been planned way ahead of time for services available in the city. We structure our fees to accommodate new growth. So this project is just complying with our general plan, and it's a permitted project. So absolutely, the fees that are structured and the services we provide are geared towards the growth that we expect in the city. So I want to just kind of reiterate the staff report for this, though, is only based on the affordable housing agreement for the project. It's not asking the council to approve the Jefferson Village Apartments project itself. So I just want to make sure the council understands the scope of the staff report here. So thank you.
All right. So with that, that's the last comment that we had on the consent agenda. So is there a motion on the consent agenda incorporating the errata that were contained for items 14, 16, 19, I'm sorry, 14 and 16 and 19 from the city manager and city clerk?
I'd like to pull item 12 for a separate vote.
All right. So is there a motion on the consent agenda with those modifications, pulling item 12?
I'll move the action as described with the changes you've outlined. Thank you.
I'll second that.
All right, then, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on the consent agenda with those changes minus item 12?
Yes. Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Aye.
and Mayor Cabaldon.
Aye. All right, that motion carries. Councilmember Ledesma, would you like to make the motion on item 13? I'm sorry, on item 12?
Yes, I'll make the recommended, because we pulled this one separate, I will make a recommended, move the recommended action on item 12.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. All right, then Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on item 12?
Yes, Councilmember Ledesma,
Aye.
Councilmember Guerrero,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin,
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco,
Aye.
Mayor Cabaldon.
Aye. All right, that motion carries. So now we'll proceed to our time-set agenda, item 20, which is public hearing and first reading of ordinance 20-15 regarding proposed amendments to the River One Development Agreement. Ms. Allen?
Good evening, Mayor Cabaldon and members of the council. This item before you is a request for amendments to the River One Development Agreement. This development agreement was originally approved in 2006 as part of the Rayleigh's Landing project and is currently set to expire in February 2021. As a reminder, in November 2019, the Planning Commission approved a tentative map for the River One Phase 1 project. And in December of last year, the council approved the project design for River One Phase 1, which includes a 7-story hotel and 7-story residential building. The amendments that are requested would extend the term of the DA by an additional 7 years, with an option for 3 additional years at the city manager's discretion. If by the time of the 7 years, the original 7 years that building permits have been issued for Phase 1. The requested amendments would also extend the term of the tentative map and the design review approval to run with the term of the DA. The DA extensions would allow the developer adequate time to complete their land use entitlements, permitting, and construction of both the hotel and the residential building that were approved by the Planning Commission and Council in 2019. The Planning Commission considered this matter on October 15th and voted unanimously to recommend that the council approve the DA amendments. Staff is recommending that the council approve ordinance 20-15 regarding amendments to the DA. This concludes my presentation. The applicant is in attendance. He does not have a formal presentation for the council, but is available should the council have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Are there questions for staff before we open the public hearing on item 3? Item 20. Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and open the public hearing then on item 20. Madam Clerk, do we have any public testimony or comments on item 20?
There are no public comments for this item.
All right, thank you very much. Then with that, we'll close the public hearing and return to the council for further questions, discussion, or for a motion. Council, Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted, thank you for the staff presentation, Ms. Allen. I just wanted to bring to our attention that the required findings and analysis and attachment 4, I think, outline and support this action this evening. And if my colleagues have no further comments, I'll move the recommended action.
All right. Then moved by Mayor Pro Tem Sandin and Councilmember Ledesma.
I will second.
Seconded by Councilmember Ledesma that the recommended action, including the complete set of attachments, be adopted. Councilmember Guerrero.
Oh, we're just waiting for the vote.
Oh, all right, Madam Clerk, then please call the roll.
Yes, Councilmember Guerrero,
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco,
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin,
Aye.
and Mayor Cabaldon.
Aye. All right, thank you. That motion carries. That brings us now to item 21, which is the public hearing and first reading of ordinances 20-12 and 20-13 regarding development agreements permits for wholesale cannabis logistics, distribution, transportation, and cannabis manufacturing at 1645 Parkway Boulevard, Suite A. Ms. Allen?
As you just mentioned, this project includes 2 development agreements for cannabis distribution and cannabis manufacturing at a location at 1645 Parkway Boulevard, Suite A. The project would be located in a building containing 2 suites, and the applicant's project would utilize 1 suite totaling approximately 7,500 square feet. No customers would visit the facility, and no signage would be on the building as per our other cannabis projects that we've approved. The project is located in a portion of the city zoned heavy industrial. Surrounding businesses include various heavy industrial uses such as produce distribution, manufacturing, and freight distribution. Staff has not received any inquiries from businesses or residents regarding this project. In addition to the community development staff from both police and fire have thoroughly reviewed the plans for the project. The applicant has been working very closely with staff from the PD on the security plan for the project, and a safety and security plan would need to be approved by PD staff prior to the initiation of operation. The Planning Commission approved the use permits for this project on October 1st and also recommended approval of the DAs to the council. This concludes my presentation. The applicant is here should council have any questions for him, but he does not have a formal presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Are there questions for staff before we open the public hearing? All right, then we'll open the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, do we have public comments or testimony on this item?
No, there are no public comments for this item.
All right, in that case, we'll close the public hearing and return it to the council for any further questions, discussion, or for a motion on item 21.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Orozco and seconded by Councilmember Ledesma. Seeing no further discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the roll on item 21.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Aye. Sorry about that. Aye.
Mayor Cabalden.
Aye. All right, with that, the motion carries. That brings us to item 22, which is a public hearing to consider goals for 5-year consolidated plan for the Federal Community Development Block Grant Program. Ms. Jacobson.
Good evening, Mayor Cabalden and council members. Isaiah is with us tonight and he's ready to do his presentation, but I just wanted to take the opportunity, since this is the first time that Isaiah has appeared before council and done a presentation, to introduce him. Isaiah joined our staff over the summer as a community investment specialist. He has a degree in economics and recently worked for SHRA prior to joining our department. And we've enjoyed having him. He's been a very valued member of staff since he joined, and we're very lucky to have him. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Isaiah.
Isaiah, welcome. You're the first staffer in economic development Katie has ever given us purple hair for, so that you must be really special. Welcome aboard, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
All right, thank you for the kind introduction. I appreciate that. Let me share my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Isaiah Alford, and I am the Community Investment Specialist in the Economic Development and Housing Department that oversees the Community Development Block Grant. This evening, I have a presentation on the CDBG 5-year consolidated plan. After the presentation, staff requests that the council open a public hearing to take any comments, and upon closing the public hearing, staff respectfully requests direction from the council on the goals of the 5-year consolidated plan. The primary objective is to review the current 5-year consolidated plan and assist the council in formulating desired goals for the new consolidated plan. Studies are being shared to shed light on the needs of low-income neighborhoods in our community. In 2016, the city of West Sacramento became an entitlement jurisdiction, which enabled the city to receive funding directly from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD. A requirement of the CDBG program is to develop a consolidated plan every 5 years. The 5-year consolidated plan must examine the needs of low-income persons in neighborhoods. As you may recall, CDBG funds must be used to address one of 3 national objectives. The first benefits low and moderate income households at or below 80% of HUD area median household income. The second is the prevention or elimination of slums and blights. The third national objective is an urgent need, which is something unexpected, such as earthquakes, tornadoes, or floods. National objectives were used to establish goals for the current consolidated plan. All of the goals are targeted to meet the first national objective. It is important to note that 70% of the jurisdiction's allocations must be used to benefit low to moderate income households. The goals for the current consolidated plan sought to reduce the incidence and impact of homelessness, achieve goals in HUD Challenge Grant Fund, Washington Realize, strengthen economic opportunities for lower income households, and affirmatively further fair housing compliance. The first 2 goals were high priorities and the second 2 were low priorities. All goals were planned through activities that fulfilled at least one national objective. Goal number 1 was to reduce the incidence and impact of homelessness. The city committed 2017 and 2018 CDBG allocations totaling just over $1 million to support the development of the Permanent Supportive Housing Project. This project is scheduled to construct 85 housing units that specifically target homeless individuals with serious mental illness or those at risk of chronic homelessness. This project is anticipated to be completed in the 3rd quarter of 2021. Goal number 2 was to achieve goals in HUD Challenge Grant Fund, Washington Realize. In 2016, over $443,000 was allocated to design improvements to a section of the Riverwalk Trail, which connects to I Street Bridge. In 2019, the city completed the $17 million Washington District Sustainable Community Infrastructure Project. In efforts to build upon this progress, the city approved a $766,490 allocation for the E&F Street Frontage Improvement Project. The objective of the project was to improve pedestrian safety and accessibility, as well as address complaints regarding sidewalk improvement for the disabled. Both activities achieved Washington Realize goals. Goal number 3 was to strengthen economic opportunities for lower income households. In 2019, $60,000 was allocated to fund the Micro Enterprise Technical Assistance Program for low to moderate income individuals owning or working towards developing a small business in West Sacramento. The Micro Enterprise Technical Assistance Program will provide a series of business development workshops in addition to individual business and financial counseling. Goal number 4 was to affirmatively further fair housing compliance. Fair housing services have been funded $21,000 every year of the current consolidated plan. Fair housing education and counseling was provided to low to moderate income individuals. Multifamily complexes were tested for compliance with the fair housing law. Included in the staff report is a brief summary of several studies staff thought are valuable in considering selection of goals for the new consolidated plan. The first being the housing element of general plan, which contains goals and policies that provide direction on key housing issues in West Sacramento. The analysis of impediments is a planning process that was completed in 2020 for local governments and public housing agencies to survey to take meaningful actions to overcome historic patterns of segregation, promote fair housing choice, and foster inclusive communities that are free from discrimination. Washington Realized focused specifically on urban structure and design, infrastructure, affordable housing, transportation, recreation and historic preservation, and land use. The policy and data gathered from these three big planning documents are the framework for future CDBG projects. As the council has seen, the CDBG program is a flexible funding source which allows entitlement jurisdictions to use the money for a wide range of activities. These activities can be acquisition and rehab of affordable housing, construction and rehab of public facilities, construction and rehab of public infrastructure, economic development activities that create jobs for low-income persons. Activities can also include homeless, youth, and senior programs. Any service activities are capped at 15% of the total allocation of any given year. Staff made a presentation to EDH Commission on October 27. This presentation included an overview of the CDBG program and development of the 5-year consolidated plan. As a result, the EDH Commission unanimously voted to recommend the proposed goals. Staff is recommending that council consider the following goals for the new 5-year consolidated plan. Homelessness has been a key focus of the council's strategic plan for the past 5 years, supported through the use of Measure E funds. Staff is recommending that this continues to be a high priority of the consolidated plan. Inclusive economic development is a part of the council's strategic plan as well, which is focused on job creation, economic growth, infrastructure, and supported through the use of Measure N funds. Affirmatively furthering fair housing is the new state language used for equal opportunity. Implementation of affirmatively furthering fair housing is a requirement of the updated housing element for the city. Based on input from the EDH Commission and planning documents summarized in a staff report, staff is recommending that the council consider and provide feedback on the above recommended goals for the new 5-year consolidated plan. This concludes my presentation. However, the following are upcoming activities that staff will engage on to continue receiving feedback for the new consolidated plan. The primary objective of these outreach activities will be to inform the public that funds will be available. The public has a right to be involved in the planning process for the consolidated plan. Once staff has completed the remaining outreach activities noted on this slide, we anticipate returning to the City Council in April 2021 for final consideration and approval of the new consolidated plan. Raul and I are available for questions. Thank you for taking time to hear my presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Alford. Are there questions before we open the public hearing? Councilmember Guerrero?
Isaiah, you did an excellent job with your presentation and background on your PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll open the public hearing now on item 22. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments or testimony on item 22?
Thank you, Mayor. We did not receive any public comments for this item.
All right, then we will close the public hearing on item 22 and return to the council for further questions or for discussion. Councilmember Orozco.
I actually don't have any questions. I just wanted to compliment Isaiah on a fantastic presentation, very clear and concise and informative. Thank you so much for bringing it to us.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Isaiah. Great job. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. So just so I'm clear, you're just looking for some direction questions as we move forward on consolidating the goals. So very supportive of the direction this is taking. I know this is sort of the administrative step we have to take and in this plan together as we go for CDBG funds going forward. And particularly as I think you articulated, I don't have the PowerPoint in front of me, but it does articulate the use of the micro enterprise funding for small potential or small business owners and whatever else, which is maybe very interested in that and how we might leverage those funds. I mean, I think this is a big need in our community, but I would just kind of encourage you and the staff and team to think about how you might leverage this. I think as we move forward in kind of post-COVID and in the Biden administration, you might see other opportunities in addition to CDBG to kind of use the money towards to bring more money and I don't know if you could use this money to leverage for some or use other grants towards these programs that we might be putting together. But my point is that I think there'll be money available in the next 2 years to support these types of endeavors. We've this isn't I think how much do we allocate towards this effort?
There was $60,000 in 2019.
Yeah, and I think I think that's that would help, obviously fund the training that we can make available. But I'd urge you to kind of look into other programs that might become available either through the federal government, through the Small Business Administration, or through other programs that may be coming through private investments in philanthropy that are funding SBDCs and others to kind of augment what we're doing here. But directionally, I like the way we're going, and mainly because this targets the very folks that need the support and the early technical assistance to be successful, to earn an income, to be able to drive towards the kind of the equity goals that we have for our community. I think that's what I think about, which is exactly how these funds you're proposing the funds to be used and exactly how we should be. And I think the more opportunities we can kind of feather in around it, and the more dollars we can feather in around it, the more comprehensive maybe we can attack the kind of the core problem. So again, I just applaud the effort and the direction you're taking here.
Thank you.
All right. Any further direction? Councilmember Guerrero?
Yes, thank you. And Isaiah, I really appreciated your, your presence when you said public input is important, and I appreciate that it is. I know it's not a whole lot of money, but I have received feedback not just from local residents, but from, as Councilmember Ledesma referenced, like matching funds and organizations such as Yola Food Bank or, even like Mercy Coalition have asked for how we can use our CDBG money. Now, it may not be the optimal funding source for the purpose, but it may provide an opportunity for you to educate organizations on how CDBG funds are used and the purpose of it in the community, because it could be more cumbersome to use that funding versus something like Measure E funding, which also has the same overlapping purpose that CDBG has. And I think using this opportunity to educate the community about the reporting requirements and kind of like the federal restrictions we have, but also taking a look at opportunities with the county Health and Human Services to see how we can match their funding sources if possible. There are CalWorks programs, there's work preparation programs, and other economic incentive programs with the coronavirus relief that we're anticipating in the future. Also mental health, there's, Mental Health Services Act funding that, there's always a 3-year plan. So if there's anything in there that we can draw down in building expanding our 60,000 plus to get another match with that. Feel free to check in with me on any suggestions. My background is pretty strong on county funding sources that I think overlap with the recommendations here.
Thank you.
All right. So any other comments or direction? This will be coming back in the spring. Seeing none? All right. Thanks very much, Isaiah. We'll then proceed to our next agenda item for the evening, which is item 23, which is consideration of resolution 20-93, adopting the midterm operations and maintenance and capital improvement program budgets for fiscal year 2021. We're going to invite Ms. Raper and also acknowledge, and I know they will be playing a role in the presentation, the two members of the council's budget subcommittee that's been working with the manager and Director Raper over the last several months on this, Councilmember Ledesma and Mayor Pro Tem Sandine.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Golden and members of the council. I've got a presentation, so let me share my screen. Figure out which one it is. All right. Are we seeing the title page of the PowerPoint? Hopefully. Okay. So we, let's see, are you going to let me? There we go. So tonight we're talking about the midterm budget. The city adopts a biennial budget every 2 years. And so the fiscal year 1920 and 2021 budgets were adopted by council in June 2019. Many things can change in a year, as we have been experiencing over the past several months and even over the past few weeks. And as such, it's necessary to revisit the adopted budget for the second year to make any necessary adjustments. And we do that through this midterm budget process. As it is a midterm, the total requests are expected to be smaller in number and total dollars than a normal annual budget. And that is definitely true for this midterm. So quick agenda, I provided, this process is a little bit different. As you mentioned, we went through a series of workshops with the budget subcommittee. However, the full council has not seen the entire detailed budget. And so I did my best through the attachments and the discussion in the report to provide a level of detail to make sure that you're comfortable with the things that are being requested and can ask questions. But as we've gone through many hours with the budget subcommittee on details, this presentation is really designed to go over an overview and allow for questions to be asked specifically by council for certain, whatever items you might have questions on. So the agenda, we'll start with a general fund update just to see where we ended the last fiscal year and what our projections are for 2021 to understand the available funding for some of the requests that are being brought forward. We'll talk a little bit about the process and how it was different this year. We'll look at the midterm budget request at a higher level by type and by funding source. We'll look at the tax measure funds and the request there, the general fund long-term model, and then move to some policy decisions and recommended action. So to start with the general fund update, the adopted budget for fiscal year 1920 anticipated operating revenues of $61.6 million. To fund operating expenses of $60 million. So we were expecting an operating surplus of $1.6 million for the year. The council adopted one-time appropriations of $10.4 million, including $4 million in contributions to the Facilities Reserve Fund to fund facility-related projects, and $2.2 million to the General Reserve Fund. I hope I said Facilities Fund before. General Reserve Fund to maintain the 17% policy level for reserve funding. Overall, the budgeted use of fund balance was expected to be $8.8 million. You can see that here in the chart, this highlighted line here. Budgeted use of fund balance was expected to be $8.8 million, leaving $6.4 million in available general fund balance at the end of June 2020. We were before council in May, a little bit after COVID and the orders to close non-essential businesses were issued. And we provided a financial update then. At that point, and here's the middle bars, we projected a significant revenue loss. And so we were projecting total revenues of $57.7 million for the year, nearly $4 million below the budget. And we projected $69.3 million in total expenses, which was about $1.2 million below the budget. Those combined resulted in an anticipated total deficit or use of fund balance of 11.6 million, which would have left about 3.6 million in available fund balance at the end of the year. We were actually lucky, as a lot of folks have been recently, including I saw an article from the state today that they were expecting a one-time windfall because of their revenues coming in better than projections. And we were similar. So actual revenues for the year came in at 60.3 million. So it's 1.2 million shy of the budget, but 2.8 million over what we had projected in May. Our actual expenses came in at 66.1 million, 4.3 million shy of the budget, and also 3.2 million less than the May projection. So we resulted in a total use of fund balance for the year here of 5.8 million. So the end result is that we have an available fund balance of 9.4 million going into the current fiscal year and the midterm budget process. So we certainly ended better than we expected in May, and even better than when the budget was adopted. Primarily, that's due to budget savings of nearly 2.7 million in the personnel category, and another 600,000 or so in unspent one-time funds, most of which are requested to be carried forward to the current fiscal year to allow for those projects to be completed. So this chart provides a visual representation of the adopted budget, our May projections, and our actual revenues and expenses for the year, showing the budgeted, projected, and actual operating deficits. That's going to be the difference between our ongoing expenses and our revenues, and then the total deficit, which includes the one-time expenses as well. So the largest revenue losses for the general fund were sales tax at just under 300,000, TOT at a little over $500,000, and charges for services, which were just under $1 million in revenue loss. And those charges for service are primarily for parks and recreation activities, summer camps, sports leagues, and things of that nature. One of the things that we noticed, not only in our budget, but also in talking with, we've had several roundtables with the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, as well as fiscal officers across the state, trying to understand the sales tax. I think we all projected a bigger hit to our sales tax revenues than we actually saw, and we were trying to figure out why they're coming in higher than we expected. And in our last conversation with CDTFA, we think that a lot of that has to do with the Wayfair decision. I think it was last year there was a decision on a case that related to collecting for out-of-state sales, collecting sales tax and remitting and reporting those for out-of-state sales. We had some projections about what that might do to our revenue budget, but we really didn't have a lot of data to base those on. And so it was a kind of a shot in the dark. And I think we thought we might see somewhere between 300,000 and 600,000 a year in additional revenues related to that. And I think that we're seeing a lot more than that. And that has helped us weather this pandemic a little bit more than we expected. So this chart shows our general fund budget to projections for the current fiscal year, 2021. The fiscal year adopted budget, is these first columns, included 738,000 in one-time expenses. And even with those one-time expenses, we projected a surplus for the year of about 300,000. Our current revenue projections assume revenue loss of about $4.2 million, and that's made up of $1.5 million in sales tax revenue, $1 million in our charges for services, and about $700,000 for TOT, and $800,000 for property taxes, which really isn't related to COVID at this point. It's a correction to how we budgeted our AB 1290 pass-through. We will probably see more property taxes than what we're expecting right now. But the way the other numbers are looking, just based on the first few months of the fiscal year, our TOT may not meet our projections. And so I'm hoping there's a little bit of cushion built in here. So when the pandemic began and revenue losses were first projected, all departments were asked to reduce their operating and maintenance budget category by 5%. So these projections here include those reductions, which are approximately 400,000 for the general fund, along with the reduced personnel costs due to maintaining position vacancies for vacant department head positions and other non-essential positions for the fiscal year. So the end result is that we're expecting to have savings of about 1.2 million for the year. And with the revenue loss, we're looking at a deficit or a use of fund balance of about 2.7 million for the year. So I mentioned that we're starting with a fund balance of 9.4 million, using 2.7. That leaves us an expected available fund balance of 6.7 million at the end of the year, or for consideration for midterm requests. So this chart shows the fiscal year end balances projected for the general fund, so our available fund balance, our general reserve, and the budget stabilization reserves. And these reserves are expected to total approximately 21 million at the end of the fiscal year. There are additional reserves available for use in an extreme emergency that we'll talk about a little bit later in the report, but I feel like this provides a good picture as far as where we're starting the year and where we expect to end the year before considering midterm budget adjustments. So the budget process, this slide shows, oh, you can see, I should move this so you can see my slides. The budget process, this provides a visual depiction of sort of each step in the budget process, and below the arrows at top, several steps that happen at each phase. But essentially our department staff enter the budget request into the budget system. There are several levels and types of review that happen after that. The first is the department head's review to ensure that the requests are accurate and appropriate before submitting them through an electronic workflow model. From there, they come to the budget team. We do an initial evaluation to ensure that the information is sufficient to make decisions. For any carry forward requests, we do a deeper review to ensure that they're appropriate. These projects are in process or intended to be started soon within this fiscal year. The amounts are accurately identified, and the reasons for carrying over the funds are understood. So for any projects that had not started, we apply a little bit of an additional scrutiny to ensure the project will be undertaken this fiscal year. Otherwise, we would have proposed that they move forward with the next biennial budget. So what's different this year too, given when we were kicking off the midterm budget process, right in the middle of trying to figure out, what was going to happen with our revenues because of the pandemic, we did an evaluation of all of the appropriations that were approved by council in June 2019 for use of any general fund dollars. Given the projected revenue losses from the pandemic, we thought it was appropriate to evaluate and see, are these going to happen? Can they move forward? Are there other appropriate funding sources that could be used to change the funding for projects that needed to continue to move forward? So with that, there are a couple of midterm requests which seek to change the funding sources for projects that were using general fund dollars. And there are a handful of capital projects that are proposed to move out to a future budget year. To free up some general fund dollars and to have better ideas about what the funding should be and what funding sources should be used for those. So beyond that review, the budget team meets with the city manager's office, the assistant city manager and the city manager to do an initial review of all of the requests, to get some feedback, answer questions, understand what the city manager knows about these projects, and review the priorities that were provided by the department for those requests. Once we go through that process, we hold a meeting, at least one. I think for this midterm we did one, but usually one or two meetings with the budget committee. So the budget committee is made up of department heads, all of the department heads, the IT manager, the innovation manager, the CIP manager, where we review together all of the requests. At that point, we don't really have information on available funding, but we really want to understand the requests, understand the needs and the impacts, and the priorities. And in that meeting, we typically get, there are going to be a handful of projects and even more that have impacts across departments. And so while one department may have submitted it, there are positive impacts or needs in other departments that move that up the priority list based on the benefit that we're expecting to receive from doing that project. So after we go through that meeting and get our priorities straight and answer any of the questions the city manager might have had in our initial meeting, we get back with the city manager and the assistant city manager to go through the results of that, agree on priority for the funding source options. And then we basically have, this is what we'd like to take forward. Now let's figure out how to fund it and make sure that we can do that. So after all those reviews are done, the finance staff compiles all the requests against the available funding. If funding is not available as requested, we find different funding sources that are appropriate and available to use towards the specific budget request. And we ensure that the budget is balanced, that we're not throwing any funds negative. And then we develop the report and the attachments that are going to be reviewed with council. So usually at that point, we will hold a budget workshop or two with the full council. This year, due to the pandemic and many other things going on, the council appointed a budget subcommittee made up of the Mayor Pro Tem Sandine and Councilmember Ledesma. So the budget team, including the city manager, the assistant city manager, and myself and my staff, met with the budget subcommittee in a series of 4 meetings, 8 hours or more in some cases overall, to go through each of the requests in detail. The process this year allowed for an even more in-depth dive with the subcommittee than would usually be allowed for with the full council, just given the time it takes to do that. But it also then made it a little bit more difficult to pull together the presentation of the report for council because the full council wasn't aware of all the details of all the requests. So I'm hoping that we've been able to adapt and we're going to provide enough information to help you make decisions. So once those workshops are complete, we make edits to the budget proposals based on feedback that we receive in those workshop sessions. The final proposed budget is then prepared for council consideration. So this year we did have, I mentioned that we had gone through and evaluated a lot of the projects and requests that were funded with general fund last year. We also looked at a lot of the requests for this year to see if there were any other funding sources that could free up the general fund dollars. At the time, we didn't have our final numbers for fiscal year 1920. And so we were looking at tax measure funds to potentially fund some of the public safety related items and other items that we reviewed that we thought could save some general fund dollars. Through the workshops and after having an update on our general fund revenues and expenses, the subcommittee provided a lot of feedback there where they didn't think some of those requests matched with the intent of the funds, where they could draw a line, but if general fund was available, it was more appropriate to use. And so we've incorporated those edits into the budget that is before you today. So before jumping into an overview of the proposed midterm budget, I'd actually like to open it up to the members of the budget subcommittee to provide their perspective on the process and any other information they have. But before that, I do want to say that it's actually been a tremendous pleasure working with Mayor Pro Tem Sandine on the budget subcommittee. Much like some of the comments that were made earlier, she asked a lot of questions. She asked the right questions. Should we do this? How should we do this? Should we do it that way? Provided thoughtful feedback and suggestions, and she even took extra time to meet with me and walk through the presentation just to make sure that it was presented to the full council in a concise, thoughtful, and meaningful way. So I can say more, but I'm going to stop and throw it over to Councilmember Ledesma and Mayor Pro Tem Sandine for their input and comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Raper, and thank you for walking us through up to this point in the presentation. And as was mentioned, our subcommittee met for, I think we had 4 meetings over a total of about 8 hours to really dive in to the budget. And just so that our colleagues understand kind of what the kinds of questions that we asked and what we were looking at. We asked about budget model assumptions, of course, particularly for sales tax and property tax that was just described. We asked about context for the carryover requests, and that's part of the process that you see before you. We asked about critical needs facing the city, the most critical needs, and the uses of one-time revenue versus ongoing costs and expenses. We asked about necessary staffing adjustments. And we also asked about what was excluded, what we might not be seeing that's coming forward, knowing that the department heads and the budget team had done a lot of work before it got to us. We discussed balancing the needs going forward, and we also talked about possible contraction that might be in front of us. We asked about the uses of tax measure revenue and appropriateness of those uses. And we asked if we were being cautious enough and what might be ahead of us. and not to be spoiler alert, but we are supportive of the recommendations that you'll be hearing and the item before us, and we feel that these are prudent and necessary actions during this midterm budget. And my colleague, Mr. Ledesma, we worked side by side and partnered on this. So you have additional thoughts about the process that our colleagues might need to hear as well.
No, I think, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sandine. I think Roberta did a great job outlining the process, and as did you, kind of our role during the process, and that it really was to start asking some of the questions that would normally come through in a budgetary workshop with the full council, and getting to some possible policy issues that are kind of embedded in here, but about the use of one-time funds and versus ongoing funds, which is really important to me. To me, a couple things that I'll kind of note, sort of on substance of the kind of the budget, is kind of on that, which is for the better part of 10 years, we've been working to really develop budget policies that provided that the city had the means to both care for really important post recession, post redevelopment. The city overwhelmingly oversaw, or at least supported, the council's work towards providing a budget where it was balanced. It made necessary investments in the community and community investments, community development and infrastructure, through Measure G, through Measure E, and recently Measure N, and as well as caring for sort of the basic services, the general fund. I think we asked the appropriate questions here about the process that they went through to provide these requests in the midterm. We asked questions regarding sort of the accountability levels, which you see in the slide in front of us, which I was concerned about, that staff had the appropriate level of accountability, discipline, rigor in evaluating budget requests. But I think more so on the policy side is the understanding of sort of where we are. I think the takeaway for me was around the ongoing versus one-time use of funds, and at the end of the day, are we still able to make prudent investments? Are we still able to do things as a city we need to do to kind of ensure the community is built up, as we can meet the needs of community investment, and meet the needs of a growing city. So I think the budget reflects that. I know Roberta, you have a lot of slides to go through still to kind of articulate sort of where we are in each of these funds. I don't want to halt that, but it's just really important. It's been really important to me on kind of how the city approaches its budgetary process and policies, that we maintain the discipline, we maintain the integrity of what the voters ask for and instructs us to do, and I think it mostly reflects that. So, Roberta, I'll let you kind of continue on your journey through this.
Okay, sorry about that. You can see I'm having trouble with two monitors, two different sizes, and I couldn't get to my picture to unmute me. So thank you. Thank you for that. I'll move on now and get started talking about our midterm requests. So in total, the midterm requests total about $8.8 million across all funds. If we exclude some of the portions of the capital projects that are funded by external funding, it's really about $8 million in requests for city funds. So about half of that, as you can see from this pie chart, is related to the capital improvement project. The rest is for the operations and maintenance supplemental requests. And you can see the breakdown here between the categories of requests, which are provided in separate exhibits to your resolutions. Let's see. Sorry, get myself confused. Okay, so dig a little bit deeper. I've got a couple more charts here that show the total O&M adjustments by category and by funding source. The net request, it shows that it's almost 4.5 million, but the net request for real appropriations is about $4 million. $500,000 of that is proposed to be carved out from the budget stabilization reserve to create a new reserve for staffing continuity program. We will talk a little bit about that as we get a little bit more in detail in some of the requests. So it's not really an appropriation request to be spent, but again, a carve out of a fund balance. Likewise, the personnel adjustment slice of the pie here shows $1 million in total, but half of that is for this reserve funding request. Our other personnel requests are outlined in Exhibit C to the report. They include an increase in our workers' compensation premiums of about $170,000. Our other post-employment benefits, actuarially determined contribution to the trust for retiree health is about $300,000. There are 3 reclassifications, 3 new positions, 1 eliminated position, and adjustments for the school resources officer program funding and other personnel adjustments recommended by the city manager's office to align the ranges for certain positions with the levels and duties and placement within the organization. There are also a $1.5 million in carryover requests, and these requests are for one-time operating projects that were started, budgeted in fiscal year 1920, started, but not able to be completed and fully paid by June 30th. So almost $500,000 of that is for police department vehicle replacements that were approved by the city council in February 2020. For vehicles which have been ordered, but then need to be built, outfitted with paint, light bars, computers, radios, all of those things. And all of that work could not happen to have them delivered by June 30th. You'll notice a little bit later, there's a request for a new round of replacements for those vehicles, for police department vehicles, and it's a similar thing. We'll be requesting the budget so that we have council authority to move forward and start that process, but that will be requested to carry forward to the next fiscal year because there just isn't enough time for all of the work to be done once they're ordered to get them in so that we can record them for that fiscal year. 1.4 million is requested for vehicle replacements and equipment, as I just mentioned, including the replacement of body-worn cameras for police officers, cardio and strength training equipment at the recreation center, and then those vehicle replacements, as I mentioned. And a little over $500,000 in technology requests. Those include the upgrade of the police department's record management system, funding to implement an automated agenda management system, an upgrade to the cloud storage for police department video storage, and tracking and reporting software for waste hauler franchise permits, and SB 1383 implementation related to state mandated organic waste disposal requirements. Other adjustments and corrections and the cost allocation plan update, those include corrections to the budget related primarily to the public works and CPT reorganization that was approved by council last August. When we pulled together that resolution pretty quickly, and there were a lot of moving parts there. And so as we went through the year and found that we had a few issues in 1920, we wanted to go ahead and correct those this year. There's also elimination of some duplicate budgets for environmental services and an update to the cost allocation methodology, which allocates the costs for internal service funds or departments like city council, city manager, HR, IT, finance, those departments that provide services to other departments who provide services then to the community. It allocates the cost based on services provided to each of the cost centers rather than by the number of full-time employees in each cost center. So these requests are primarily requested in the general fund and the general facilities and equipment funds, as you can see by the funding chart here, with a handful of requests for tax measure funds and road-related funds. We'll move on to the capital. So capital project requests, these charts show the total CIP adjustments by project type and funding source. The bulk of the funding requests for the capital projects are for a handful of transportation-related projects, including the Phase 1 of the State Streets Road Rehabilitation Project, which is proposed to be funded using SB1 funds. New projects for arterial pavement repairs and neighborhood pavement repairs, which are proposed to be funded using a combination of Measure K and Measure E funds. The largest requests for road-related projects, as you can see, are from SB1 and Measure E. from that chart. You'll also notice there's a couple slices of the pie. I didn't notice this until I pulled this together, so it makes it not really a pie, but that are negative. So those are reduced project funding. There is one water project that was moved up a fiscal year, and council adopted budget in 1920 to move it forward, but we already had budget adopted in 2021, so we're eliminating that duplicate budget. And then several facility-related projects that are proposed to move out to a future fiscal year, likely to be considered during the next biennial budget. So these projects were identified through our evaluation of general fund projects that could either be delayed or funded from a different source. And one of them is the facility vehicles and equipment master plan. We are moving that out, and we're looking for other funding. Part of that work is actually going to be done gathering the inventory of all of our assets through the CMMS implementation project. And once we have a better idea of our world of assets that are going to be managed by this system and what we're working with, then we can use that to come up with a better allocation of funding from appropriate sources. And so general fund doesn't necessarily pay the entire thing. So I believe, am I moving on to the next slide? So other related items for council consideration, included in the personnel budget request is a request to upgrade an accounting technician 3 position to a revenue supervisor position with a $6,000 budget impact. The justification for this change is provided in a detailed decision package that's included in attachment 3 to this report. And in fact, any new position requests, the decision packages with the full details have been provided in your report. Same with any requests for use of tax measure funds. We want to make sure that council had all of the information for those types of policy decisions. So with the creation of a new job classification for revenue supervisor, council is asked to approve the classification and the job description to allow for the recruitment process to begin should the council be supportive of this proposed change. So the job description and classification were coordinated with HR, reviewed and approved by the union representative as well. Also included in this category are a couple of position reclassifications. As I mentioned, position funding changes, changes to pay ranges, which require updates to the publicly available pay schedule and the authorized position list. So there are 2 APLs attached. One is effective July 1st for those changes that are retroactive to July 1st. Reclassifications and some of the position funding changes are proposed to be retroactive to July 1st. And then there's one APL that is proposed to be effective November 18th with the adoption of the midterm budget to include any adjustments that are effective with the adoption of the midterm budget. The benefit summaries for the department head group and other unrepresented groups are also attached. Those have been revised to include language related to council-approved vacation buyback programs for those groups, and the budget impacts for those have already been included in the budget. All right, so overall, this slide shows the difference between all of the midterm budget requests, the amount that's ongoing versus the amount that's one time. So it's important to note that in total, the midterm requests are primarily one time in nature. One of the questions that comes up during the budget process, and it's one I ask myself, especially in times of recession or our current situation, looking at some significant potential revenue loss. And this was also a question posed by the budget subcommittee during our workshops. If we take these actions tonight, are we handcuffing ourselves in the future? So can the city's finances continue to handle and fund the impacts that the request will have on future budget years? To answer that question, we did a rough update of the long-term model for the general fund. We used a conservative lens to some extent to ensure that the general fund can handle these requests long-term. And I say to some extent because in prior years, last year, I provided a model that had a couple of different scenarios. You know, if things are really rosy and kind of follow what they've been doing the last few years, this is what we might see, you know, kind of middle of the road, most likely projections. And then if we were to have a recession or, you know, to see a significant decrease in assessed values and property taxes. We didn't do that this time. I just kind of have one line with some rough projections. And we don't have a crystal ball. So right now things are up in the air. There's not a lot known. Things are changing on a regular basis, but we did use the best information that we have available today. And like I said, remain somewhat conservative in our assumptions. So we, for example, did not include annual projected savings in the expenditure budget. We saw earlier that we had $2.7 million in savings last year in the labor line items alone for the general fund. And so we didn't make any, we assumed that the full budget would be spent in our long-term model. We also didn't include the large annual property tax revenue increases that we've been seeing over the past few years. I was more conservative and used less than 2% for the first year and about 2% going forward. Over the past 5 years, the average increase in general fund property tax revenues on an annual basis was 6.7%. And looking at the last 10 years, it was almost 9 or over 9%. So being a little bit conservative there on our largest primary source of revenues for the general fund, and then also not including some of those assumptions for budget savings, I think that they're that it gives a decent picture of what we can hope to expect over the next few years. Although, as we know, things are changing pretty quickly. So, so to get to the long-term model and show you what that looks like, this chart shows the forecasted revenues and expenditures for the general funds for the next 10 years. We've broken them down by category. So this light yellow green are ongoing expenses. The one-time expenses are identified in this blue color. Reserve contributions are the darker green. You can see the larger reserve contributions we made last year, and skipping a year when we don't have the revenues necessarily to do it. Midterm budget requests are this lighter Kelly green at the top. And so in 2021, these midterm revenue requests midterm requests would include our ongoing and one-time requests. In future years, I've escalated the cost of the ongoing requests for each of those years. So you won't see the one-time in future years. The chart shows that a deficit is expected for 2021, as we just mentioned. It was expected before the midterm adjustments. And there's a very slight deficit of about $100,000 expected for 21-22. Starting in 22-23, we are forecasting a surplus, which allows for the additional set aside to the facilities reserve and or the general reserve. One of the reasons, too, we don't see any contributions to reserves in 21-22 is that we'll see this on the next slide, but we're actually over the 17% currently for the general reserve. And so we don't need to start making additional contributions until we dip below that to keep it at the 17% policy level. So let's see. The results of the model obviously depend on the assumptions used. So the expenses have been forecast with similar assumptions to the previous long-term model, again, based on total budget. I mentioned that it doesn't include any offset for assumed underspending or budgetary savings, though we do experience a lot of that each year. There are also contingencies included in the budget that are typically not fully spent. So there's a council contingency and a general fund contingency that together make up about $400,000 or $500,000 that we don't typically spend. And so there's a little bit more cushion there. We talked about the revenues. They do not forecast a reduction in property tax revenues, which is a potential, especially with an extended pandemic, which could cause an increase in foreclosures or Prop 8 assessed value reductions. But that's yet to be known or yet to be seen. And property tax revenues are typically a little bit delayed. So we'd have a little bit of advance notice if we started to see some of that activity happening before we saw the impacts to our revenues. So I mentioned property taxes are forecast with an annual increase of around 2%. In the last 5 and 10 years, we've seen annual average increases of 7%. With property tax revenues making up the largest portion of the general fund revenues, conservative projections here can really go a long way. So I did a little test just to see, looking at 22-23, if I change that from 2% to 4%, that results in additional revenues of over $4 million for the rest of the years of the model. If we see revenues closer to 6% in that 1 year, that's $9 million in additional revenue. So small changes sometimes can have a big impact. So looking at our general fund reserves, this chart shows the general fund reserves available fund balance, the general reserve and the budget stabilization reserve, as well as the proposed carve out for the staffing continuity reserve in that bright yellow line across the 10-year model. The council adopted policy for the general reserve is to fund it between 15 to 20% of annual general fund revenues. So we've historically tried to maintain at least 17% level for this reserve. The white line shows what amount that would be based on the forecast general fund revenues for that year at 17%. The forecast shows that the reserve is above the 17% right now and through 21-22. Part of the reason for that is that we adopted a budget to transfer $2.2 million to that reserve to keep it at the 17%. With the revenue losses we're seeing from COVID, that 17% of a smaller number is obviously a lower number. But we made that contribution of $2.2 million primarily, well, it was budgeted and also just to have a little bit of extra cushion in that reserve for the next couple of years, not knowing what's coming. So for the next couple of years, we're above the 17%, but we remain at the 17% in the forecast period. So let's see. Additionally, the total value of these reserves dips to a low of about 19 million. You'll see that kind of right around here, these couple of years, about 19 million. And it's forecast to increase again to about 22.8 million in the last year of the model. Again, disclosure, it's really hard to forecast, beyond a few years. So once you get out, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, this is really, really rough. But that being said, this chart shows all of the general fund reserves that in truly bad times are completely up to the council discretion to use. So it includes the general fund balance we talked about. Excuse me, let me see if I can go back. Oh, I did that twice. Okay, so it's got the general reserve we just looked at, the budget stabilization, the staffing continuity reserve, and then it also has the general equipment replacement reserve, the general facilities reserve, and the general rehabilitation replacement reserve. So those are reserves that have been funded with general fund dollars. They are non-discretionary, discretionary, could be used, though they have been set aside for particular purposes, and we plan to keep them that way. But I wanted to give you a full picture of the reserves that are available. So what this chart shows is that there's a total of between 32 and 38 million of reserves available in any given year of the model. As you know, we've got a lot of equipment replacement needs, certainly a lot of facility needs. And so those are areas where we want to make sure that we're continuing to contribute because those funds are used on a regular basis and are not just sitting in a reserve. So almost done. To recap and summarize the data that's been presented, 97% of the total requests are one-time in nature. Again, that's across all funds. You'll see that actually the general fund requests, more of them are ongoing than one time, but as a rule for all of the requests, 97% are one time. About 16.6% of total requests are for council-approved appropriations for the last fiscal year for projects that are in process that are requested to be carried forward to this fiscal year so they can be completed. Little under 16% of the requests are for vehicle and equipment replacements, which follow historical replacement practices and schedules and or are to replace vehicles that are over a decade old. I think one of them, for example, is a 2003 vehicle. I've never worked in a city where we've been made vehicles last as long as we do here in West Sacramento. And just under half, 49% of the requests are for capital project funding. The majority of the capital project funding, again, is for pavement repair projects. I think like 3 or 4 of those very expensive projects. The technology requests, personnel-related requests, the cost allocation plan update, and all of the other requests combined make up the remaining 18.8%. And the ongoing general fund adjustments are primarily non-discretionary. So there are certainly some discretionary adjustments with reclassifications, new positions, things like that. But the majority of the dollars requested for general fund are for the workers' comp premium increase, corrections to the public works and CPT, like I mentioned, the cost allocation plan update, and providing additional funding to backfill the lost revenues from the school district for our school resource officer program. So embedded in the budget request and the recommended actions before you today are several policy decisions, and this I'm sure does not capture all of them, but I think these are ones that I certainly wanted to draw your attention to. So the use of tax measure funds. Any items that are requesting the use of tax measure funds have been provided in detail in attachment 10. So we provide a report which provides a summary of the already adopted and the requested budgets for each of the categories within each tax measure. And then we provide detail on each of those. Attached to that are the decision packages and the capital project detail pages for each request. And then we provided a 10-year model for each of the tax measures as well. So you can see easily, if you approve the requests that are before you tonight, what that means for the tax measures funds for this year and for the next several years. I mentioned that. So there is specifically, there is a new CIP project for arterial pavement rehabilitation that is proposed to be funded fully by Measure E. The reason for that is that the other road-specific funding sources are unavailable or they're proposed to be used elsewhere. So I mentioned earlier, we are proposing to use all of our SB1 fund balance and revenues for the year to fund the first phase of the State Streets Road Rehabilitation Project. The road fund, as you know, has long had issues of not having available capacity to fund additional projects, and that leaves General Fund, Measure E, and Measure K. The road projects were proposed by the department, split between Measure K and Measure E. But when we went through our analysis of available funding and the priorities for all the projects, there just simply wasn't enough Measure K available Measure K to go around. And so we changed the arterial project to be fully funded by Measure E. It's certainly something that we would like council to weigh in on. It is important to note that while Measure K doesn't have available fund balance, there is a reserve of $800,000 in that fund that is set aside for future projects at the council's discretion. So, you know, if you wanted to make a change, it's totally the council's discretion, and there are about $800,000 in Measure K funds that are available for you to draw from. Balancing the budget using the general fund balance. You know, we have proposed a budget here that is balanced utilizing our available fund balance, but certainly that's a policy decision for council as well. We've made some cuts and we expect to have some additional savings, but we have proposed a use of fund balance. And then there's the staffing continuity program policy, the reserve amount and the funding source that are certainly, that we'd love your feedback on. So staff has proposed a level of $500,000 for this reserve. The reserve, the policy is intended so that if there are upcoming known retirements or resignations, particularly in key positions, hard to fill positions, things that would require a little bit more overlap for training, and in public safety where it takes a long time to get somebody through the academy fully trained and out on the streets. Staff has proposed the ability to overhire those positions, to hire an additional position that is not on the APL to allow for some transition period and overlap between the outgoing position and the incoming position for training. Those types of overhires or hiring additional folks before the next person leaves typically are funded by savings elsewhere in the budget or in the labor budget. We did a similar reserve like this in a previous agency that I was with, and we never tapped it because there was always savings somewhere to be able to fund those. Alternatively, you'll also see a couple of items tonight related to positions where we've got a long-term employee retiring and we'd like to be able to hire replacements in advance to allow for some training. And so I've asked specifically for additional budget for that. We would either use savings, ask for budget specifically from council, and we would use this reserve that's set aside as a last resort. And I don't expect it to be tapped. But we've also proposed to take an existing reserve, the budget stabilization reserve, which is different, by the way, from the general reserve that has that 17% funding target. The budget stabilization reserve, we've proposed to carve that amount out of that reserve. So now instead of sitting in a line called budget stabilization, there will be two lines, one that's budget stabilization and one that would be this the reserve for this program. And that budget stabilization reserve is general fund. So, the council could also determine that it doesn't want to use general fund. So those are items for your consideration tonight. The proposed administrative policy, as well as the decision package that talks about the funding, is included as attachment 5 to the report. There are also personnel changes. We've mentioned some of them previously. The requests related to position changes impact not only the budget, but as I mentioned, the authorized position list, the classification schedule, and in some cases, the benefit summary. So in addition to approving the budget or considering the budget tonight, council is requested to approve the related documents that would include the new job description as well. And as I mentioned, the detailed decision packages for the reorganization, the personnel changes, the new positions are all included in the budget packet as attachment 3, and the job description is attachment 4. So I think at this point, what we've got, there are a lot of items here on the recommended action. I won't regurgitate them because they were also included in the policy decisions we just went over. But we are requesting your approval of the budget and those related documents. And so I know I went through that pretty quickly at a really high level, but I would like to open it now. Back to the budget subcommittee, if you've got anything to add, or to the council for any questions that you might have on any specific requests.
My only, thank you, Roberta. I just want to remind folks, because I did the spoiler alert midterm, that we're the subcommittee supportive of the recommendations on the item, and gone over this again, as you know, with a fine-tooth comb. So thank you for all the detailed background for us.
Great. Yeah, and thanks to the subcommittee, which itself has already spent 10 hours on this item. So and we're simply in the middle of the 2-year budget. This isn't the full 2 years. So are there further questions or discussion? Councilmember Guerrero.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the work that the subcommittee has done in preparing this, and wanted to ask a couple of questions related to, there's a background justification statement for police officer overhiring finance policy, and I appreciate some of the history that prevented, hiring of police officers, the turnover, and then, ultimately how long it takes for a police officer to be fully trained and independent. It takes a long time. And some of the thought I had was for a while has been on looking at hiring reserve police officers and considering that in the future, not in this time, but to explore it with our police chief and POA to see the option of being able to do that in the future, so that we can alleviate the workload and the pressure that is placed on our police officers. So to give them a supplemental support in some way through a reserve officer program. We have some Measure N money that was unexpended, and I just can see maybe an opportunity to use that as an initiative. But also, in addition to that, I know that we have a lot of criminal activity in some way that could be tracked down with the appropriate technology. And I do know that police chief has presented some pilot program along the riverfront to implement a technology, based model so that we can track criminal activity and then just reduce the workload as investigations continue. So that might also have help through an initiative in Measure N in the future. I know that they've been talking about it for a while, but I just haven't seen anything in writing from the department. And if they can explore that and present that. Also, there has been a lot of activity in our first responder demand among our firefighters this last year, given the climate change and the extended winds and heat and everything that's happening in our region. We all struggled with the fire and the smoke, so we were directly impacted. But I've observed that our firefighters are definitely away more in strike teams, and I think their workload is, and I know it's part of the job, but I also like to make sure that, if we do need to have another engine, sometimes even our fire trucks or our engines are out. And so that we have the capacity to maintain taking care of our own home front with the fire engine at some point, just to explore that in the future. Moving on, in other parts, I appreciate your staffing continuity program recommendation. It is a little broad. I would think of looking at it in a more refined, like what are the positions that you're identifying. I think this is a great recommendation for continuity for key positions that do require some overlap in training. But just wanted to see if there's more specifics on that, like looking at police and fire, whether it be a lieutenant or is it just the police department? In that case over there, there's just a lack of police officers overall. And maybe administratively, I'm thinking, if there's a way to do some overlapping when there's an executive level position leaving, retiring, or whatever, that we do have that supplemental, overlap there. In looking at the, going back on the community outreach, I do have a question, and after I'm done with all my questions, it'll be on whether we were able to have matching funds drawn down for the community outreach social workers through the Mental Health Services Act, and just seeing if we were able to draw down that from that 3-year plan that's in the Mental Health Services Act, so that our social workers are, there's a 50-50 match, or if there's any kind of match in that program for the hiring of the social workers. And if not, could we explore that? I don't know if they've all been hired already, but if we can continue to explore that in that partnership with the Mental Health Services Act, because I think they have the same desired outcome that we have here with our community outreach division. And moving forward and looking at the parks and open space master plan, I just want to give a shout out to WESAC Play for the partnership and the funding that was provided there to make that happen. It's a really nice project here in the community, and looking at the community benefit that we've seen. In addressing the pavement management program, just considering other funding sources, I would be more open to that, and what other options we may have. I know that in our conversation, this is really a limited, pool of funding that we can identify. But if you can share more ideas on what other funding sources we can use for critical pavement rehabilitation that is much needed around the city, and if only Measure E is the funding source that I think you're identifying here as a need that is being tapped for Measure E funding. And on the Enterprise Bridge, if there is just a brief update, I love the bridge idea. And I see that there is a study that is going to be done. So this is kind of like the first step, if this is a necessary step at this point. And that concludes my recommended questions.
Okay. Did you want me to? I can respond to some of those.
Yeah, probably some there. Many sound like they're for the manager as well.
Yeah, I can respond to one. I think the rest would be for the city manager or the departments. But for the pavement management program, the funding sources that are typically available for these road programs outside of grant funds for things that that are certainly looked into by the CPT staff. It's a general fund, the road fund, which is gas tax revenues, the SB1 fund, and then our tax measure funds that have some annual funding targets towards those types of projects. The gas tax fund, as I mentioned, the road fund does not have capacity to do that. In fact, if you refer to, I believe it's Exhibit I, the all funds summary, which provides you with each fund and the projected balance at the end of the year after funding the proposed adjustments, that is the one fund that ends negative by about $4,000. I don't think it will actually end negative, but there is just no available funding. The SB1 funds are being proposed to be used fully, what we have now in our revenues for this year, towards that State Street Road Rehabilitation Phase 1 project. And so that really leaves Measure K and Measure E. I think, we can certainly continue to look for additional grant opportunities or outside funding. But as far as, city funding available towards those, that's pretty much what we've got.
And just to tack on to that and answer the question, I heard a lot of that, I think, was comments about suggestions for future budgets. But on roads, we do have other sources besides Measure E, like Roberta said. It's just based on the availability. I did hear a question though on the working with the county on the clinician status, and we are still pursuing that plan to have the county funding pay for, I believe it's half the positions. I see Chief Strange on there. He'd give you a quick update on the status of that, but I know we haven't filled those positions yet, but I know it's in the works.
Yeah, we're in the process and actually have onboarded one clinician currently, but the agreement with the county is that we're only responsible for $60,000 per employee. And so we're going to have 2 employees from Health and Human Services, and that is going to be less than half of the cost of that employee, especially as the cost of those employees increase over time.
All right, and then we have, I know several issues were raised, but they're probably issues for the strategic plan and for the 2-year budget that will be coming up next year, as we are in middle of November in the fiscal 2021 part of the budget as well. So we had an expedited consideration of this budget item because of the COVID situation and the work of the subcommittee, but more broader new policy changes and that sort of thing are probably more appropriately addressed in the strategic plan and then in the budget that follows. I concur. I mean, I think of the same direction as Councilmember Guerrero on the road piece, which is it's not going to be sustainable for Measure E to be the only source, and I'm concerned about it. I mean, I do think as we program forward Measure E, Measure N, some of the tax measures that have allocation methodologies, and the revenues grow, over time. We hope if the economy is good, they will grow faster than that. The residual cannot just be whatever happens to be on the minds of the budget committee and the city manager that year. It cannot. Whether that's a shelter or road rehab, those are important priorities, but they cannot be. Measure E needed to be available for a critical road rehabilitation project in the state streets to help to support that and leverage other money. But where it's not leveraging other funds, and it's not, then those aren't available for other uses in Measure E, I have some concerns about it. So I'm going to support it tonight. I know this because the subcommittee has asked a lot of these questions, and I know the budget reflects that. But I just want to emphasize that for our friends in the Public Works Department and the Finance Department, that this Measure E and its residual funds, its carryover funds, its one-time funds are not they are not being allocated implicitly to whatever the road fund otherwise would have spent. We can't. Those are still policy decisions that need to be consistent with what the voters approved in E and N and K and the other sources that we have. So continuing that work to find other sources and then to preserve the limited discretionary funds that we have, preserve those to the maximum extent possible to unlock other people's money. And so the project that we have before us tonight doesn't really do that. Which is why I think it's fine for, like I said, I'm voting for it because it's the necessary project, and I know the committee's worked hard on it. but I don't want to get away from the notion that Measure E is small and it has the potential to unlock much more. The other thing I want to say is I really appreciate the subcommittee and staff's attention to the budget, to the long-term budget, and to the issues of what the appropriate reserve levels are and how to manage those properly. And this notion of making sure that when tough times hit, as they have hit many times in West Sacramento's short life, that we don't have to lay people off, that we don't have to cut essential services. And this year was a terrific example of that, is that we could really focus on making sure that we were here for others as a city, that we were here for our residents, that we were here from the community, whereas other cities, I know this from hearing from other mayors all over the place, other cities are like, we might have to shut down ourselves, and we're not sure we're here. And we have to have the reserves and the reserve policies that make sure that when things get really bad, especially with emergencies or surprises, that we are here to keep the water on, to put the fires out, to keep the crime from happening, or from distributing to distribute a vaccine, or whatever may be needed. And so these policies are really critical. And the charts the forecasts are encouraging and hopeful. And I have every reason to, statistically, we have every reason to believe in them. But we're not through this current crisis by any means. We're at the worst stage that we've been in for the year and on every indicator on COVID. We don't have a CARES Act past December 31st for all the activities that we and our partners at the county have undertaken up to this point. And we have all of that on top of potentially, hopefully, the need to distribute and assure widespread use of a vaccine for which nearly half of Americans say they don't intend to take in the first 3 to 6 months. I mean, we will have a major task on our hands as a community. Those are not primarily the city's responsibilities, for sure. But we know from this year that we play a significant role in that space. And so we have to continue to be fiscally prudent in order to make sure that we're here for the people that need us the most, and we're here for everyone when everyone needs us in crises like we've experienced. So I really appreciate the focus at that level and the modesty of these changes notwithstanding what I just said about the road rehab piece, in total, there is a clear recognition, acknowledgement, and valuing of the need to be conservative at this point, given where we've been at. Also, just to commend the staff team and the work that was done on the May forecasts, that the fact that the actuals came in somewhere in between forecast and where we were a year ago is a testament to that forecasting work. And it shows, kind of exactly what we had asked the staff to do, which was be fiscally conservative, so that we're not caught unawares. But also don't be crazy about it, right? Don't presume that we will have no money and we will have doubled our spending. And as a result, we're in the position to be that you showed in the charts. And I think it's very, very positive. So I appreciate the policy work on this and that's gone forward. We have, to some extent, dodged a fiscal bullet this year that we could have dealt with, and that's partly because our local economy isn't as tourism dependent. It's not as restaurant and theater dependent. It's partly because our operation has been extremely prudent in its spending and in hiring and everything else in order to keep costs down. But that's no guarantee for the future. That what we are starting to see, and many of us are hearing from our local small businesses that are saying, look, we barely made it this far, and we can't handle a winter with no indoor service or what have you. And so we can't, our experience over the last several months on revenues isn't necessarily a guide to the future for next year. And it's a reason to continue to maintain those reserves as we have, and as has been proposed, move forward with this additional reserve category for staffing sustainability. So great work. I'm prepared to support it this evening and appreciate all of the time and effort that's gone into it. Councilmember Ledesma.
Yeah, and I just want to respond to a couple of things you said and Councilmember Guerrero said as well. And first on on the Measure E one, that one, kind of how we approach the road rehab projects. And I think Roberta could attest, and Aaron as well. I mean, just on the measures in general, I think Mayor Pro Tem Sandine and I asked questions about the integrity of those tax measures and how we spent, and had to weigh them against projects that were kind of at the point of being shovel ready to go. And I think that was a consideration here. And I think from my point of view is that as much as we can further the work we are doing on some of these sort of infrastructure community investment type projects, and are kind of shovel ready, where we're looking at a new administration that might be having infrastructure dollars available to leverage. So I think that's, I want to kind of reassure you that we did look at that, right? Your concerns about it. It's not sustainable. I think we asked those questions about how, especially E, Measure N is another one, because it's some of it's still undefined, and we need to work towards, especially on reserving some of those dollars for inclusive economic development, but defining exactly public safety in the Measure N discussion. I'll draw down to the kind of comment I'm on the staff continuity plan, because that's a direct result of, I was supportive of that. We had to find an answer to that directly because of the exact changes we talked about in our police reform efforts, and ensuring that positions that we were caring for now for these new types of roles, it was clear we needed to make sure we had cushion so that, again, in the case of retirements or whatever else, exactly what this cares for. And so the question I asked, is that an appropriate use of Measure N? And I think to ensure that the police have the wherewithal to hire in advance of a retiring officer. So again, that's something I'll kind of put out there as maybe the next round of budget, a strategic planning type initiative about defining really kind of those initiatives. But it is the reserve on those things. I should say it's meant to kind of care for, at least in my mind, having a discipline to care for those things that the taxpayer said expected us to use them for. And so I think those are things that I was thinking about in all of this at a kind of policy level. And to your point, Mr. Mayor, is that, yeah, we got lucky. We're dodging a bullet. I'm not sure there's not another bullet or three coming at us. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's the really hard part about this. This is unlike, I think I stated this to Roberta and to Aaron, this is unlike any economic recession I think the country has seen. In 2008, 2007, 2008, we had a rapid drop off of property values and home values, which then precipitated a rapid drop in unemployment and rapid drop in property tax revenues and everything else that we depend on. Here we have this prolonged state of unemployment and loss of revenue that hasn't translated, at least yet, to anything on property taxes or anything else. But we all know that there's a ton of forbearance in the market holding up real estate values, and there's a ton of programs that are still winding through, either through the CARES Act or other programs, and there may be another wave of that coming with a new administration. But regardless, we still got to be prudent. And I said this at the introduction of this, is that our budgeting policies are really much based on our ability, and this is what the voters have backed us on, is at the beginning of 2012 with Measure G, our ability to invest in our community and infrastructure, and Measure E, invest in our people through home run, through homeless initiatives, through and to be able to provide road rehabilitation and pipe projects that it does, and trails and everything. The community said, find a way to keep investing and be prudent with your dollars. And I think that's what we tried to be true, because we still don't know in the general fund side what's coming, whether it's property taxes. And I'm glad Roberta and I talked about the long-term budget model and kind of the assumptions we're going into it, because we don't know that. We still haven't factored in kind of what kind of the CalPERS OPEB payments might be because of any potential loss in market value that they may experience. And those are all things that still could come at us in residual years 2, 3, 4. So I think, this process works in terms of, I am most pleased about the fact that staff, Aaron, Roberta, had a rigorous process to evaluating these. There's still a lens of being prudent, but finding opportunities to be to continue to invest in the community and support projects and public works projects that benefit the community, and reserving for the future, right? And I think that's the part that we just don't know. And I think that looking at what you put in on the reserves policy was an extremely important part of being prepared. So again, I'm supportive of this. I had questions too. I brought up one, and I didn't bring it up, Roberta, but I questioned because you put on one of your slides the amount of money we're putting in vehicle replacements. I went the opposite direction a little bit on that one, because I said part of our climate change plans or goals are around reducing our carbon footprint. And is there an opportunity there for us to look at those purchases from a kind of those vehicles that we are actually owning and putting on the ground? I know Chief Strange is probably twisting a little bit in the seat, but again, those are things that we have to ask questions on. These are things that absolutely matter in our community. And I think Roberta's answer to that was a really good one, which is taking a more holistic look at all our vehicle purchases and having a program in place where we're not just buying one for the Parks Department, one for the Police Department, one for Public Works. And we should have a more consolidated approach and centralized approach to how we do that. So again, this was a really and a really kind of robust process that, as I'm talking about, I'm even more impressed with, because we asked really good questions, and the result is a prudent budget that makes, I think, our residents expect us to continue to make the right investments, to use the funds they voted for in the way they and what they voted, what they were about, use them in that manner, but be prepared. And I think it represents that. So I just want to make sure I address those few issues.
Councilmember Guerrero, Orozco.
So I agree with a lot of the comments made by my colleagues and the mayor. The reserves, such a good. I'm glad. I mean, there have been people who have said, "Oh, we should lower the reserves," and it's just clear how irresponsible that suggestion would be, especially at a time like this. I'm happy that we are able to navigate in the way we are, because this is the same recipe that what's going on is bringing down other people, other cities, in a way that we're able to coast. And I know it has more than to do with just that, just the base of our economy and whatnot, but the freedom that we have to talk about anything new has a lot to do with the forecasting and how we planned appropriately. I want to thank Roberta and the team and our city manager and the department heads and our budget subcommittee for the time, 10 hours or more that you put into doing this. And I meant this budget subcommittee by themselves. I mean, the meetings happened long before that, I'm sure. But with so many unknowns, we're navigating a time that we just have. We have to plan accordingly. And I'm pretty frugal. I had meetings with our city manager and our finance director, and I'm pretty guarded with funds. I'm known to drive my cars down to their last life, which one of them died on Jefferson Boulevard last year, which, that's how it rolls. So when I hear, oh, we're going to replace vehicles, it's like, well, wait a second. So I had to really recalibrate to recognize this isn't a 2015 upgrade to a 2020. This is a 2003 and a 2006 vehicle that we absolutely need to replace. And I just really commend our police department for trying to repurpose and to save, by using what we have and squeezing the last life out of it. We don't have an infinite ability to solve every problem. And as much as I want to find the recipe for that, clearly we're limited and we have a role. And when I looked at the proposals, there were a lot of things that I exercised a lot of scrutiny with, but I also appreciate that there was already multiple layers of scrutiny before even getting to our eyes and seeing this. I'm going to start with the staffing continuity, which was a very big factor for me a few months ago when determining what the complexion of 5 unfunded FTEs in the police department would look like. And I'm actually very proud of the efforts we made to ensure that we had something there for police, specifically the CSO positions and crisis intervention, and now a new position with Taylor Nelson, which is just a fabulous addition to the future of our city. But I read and reread and talked about this because I wanted to ensure that when the opportunity arose for us to get officers who are ready to make the commitment, that we could pounce on the opportunity. This is not a West Sacramento problem. We've talked about this before, but my husband's dedicated 24 years of his life to the Sacramento Police Department and hiring and retaining. Retaining is harder for us, but hiring right now for any agency is a gargantuan effort. And we're talking about high qualified, motivated individuals who are willing to, uphold that oath. And that's what I want to see in our city is the best of the best. And of course, when we have an opportunity to send somebody through the academy, let's do it. So the staffing continuity is a big deal. And I know, Roberta, you said that, there's probably not, we probably won't even be tapping into it just because of the, retirements and the overturning of the personnel. But in any case, if we saw 5 capable individuals who are willing to hire right now, I want to make sure that we have, we're nimble and we can do that. I had expressed my concerns about it being in a budget reserve, but I recognize that the budget stabilization reserve isn't the same type of reserve that we would be looking in the general reserve. So I'm just happy to hear that. I was listening to comments of my colleagues. I think if we wanted to backfill, I understand reserve officers could be a possibility, but CSO positions also can do a great job, especially if they can commit to a future with our department, because they're starting off and they're, incoming and could be moldable and trainable and maybe just get the required skills they need early on in order to then transition to a commitment with our department. And they're young and energetic for the most part. So, I would also consider that. I did have some questions. Back when we talked about, and this might be a question for Tracy, I don't know if she's actually on the call, but if we don't get this answer now, it's fine. I just want to make sure that we talked about replacement of cardio equipment and the rec center, and we were leaning toward leasing and renting the equipment because of the expense of fixing them. And then, of course, they get so outdated so quickly. And there's always a new trend in the gym for something new and great. Now, every gym probably wants a Peloton as opposed to a Stairmaster or whatnot. just making sure that we were moving from instead of acquisition, but rather renting them for cost savings. I hope that they would be, at least would be more state of the art, but then also trying to figure out whether or not we could recoup any of our membership fees by doing like online or Zoom or digital classes for people that still want to maintain their membership, but doing what the other gyms are doing right now when they have to operate with different conditions. I also had a question about our police records management system. In Sacramento City, we have a cloud storage, a video storage process that now all the district attorneys call on, and it's so much better than before. When we had to order a freaking video on disc, and then it'd take us forever to get it, and then we'd have to put the disc in disk drive, and half the time it didn't work. But now we could just like click a button and bam, we have everybody's body cam. And is that what we're buying? Because that's a high price tag, but if that's what we're getting, then okay, because that is fabulous, and it would definitely do a service than buying a lot more storage over time. And it's also the wave of the future, so we got to get hip with that. I also wanted to commend, I think the recommendation for an augmentation to the Yolo County Library that's great. It's rough to arrive at the library and find out it opens at 12. And right now, more than ever, when people are grappling with just needing resources to teach their kids at home, oh my gosh, like I don't know how long it took me to find one book because it was on hold by everybody who has a 9-year-old. And, we don't only need, more breadth, but also the number. I mean, we all might want the same book, and resources. And our Arthur Turner Library has a lot of good stuff, especially for the younger learners. But right now, we need stuff that's readily accessible, both in quality and quantity, and it's going to sometimes replace school resources that many people can't access. And so I know that there's a lot of stuff that you could rent from the library, like Chromebooks and stuff. And to the extent that we can make sure that that's a resource for kids that aren't in school right now and bridge that digital divide, especially for our kids that are just not getting what they need and they would normally get through school, it's huge. So I'm all about that. I agree with my colleagues about Measure E, and it shouldn't be the pot. I mean, we definitely, I know that it's very difficult for us to find grants for roads. And I, spent a few hours with Vin and our road staff talking about this, and how expensive it is for us to pay for even just a stretch of roadway. Millions of dollars for even the West Capitol Road rehab, like $17 million for 3 miles, crying out loud. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But that's a big source of a lot of folks, discontent is, popping a tire on a dang, Roberta, that's a big bottle. But I want to make sure that we, well, at least my intention to make sure that we keep that as a priority. And I think that might be actually it. I just, I do appreciate that this was combed over, and by the time it gets to us, it's pared down to the extent where we're not, obviously we can't fund everything we want to do right now, but this is a fantastic start, and I'm very appreciative of the efforts of both staff and my colleagues. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Manager, there was a few questions and a couple of suggestions. Did you want to take them up at all?
Sure. One, Councilmember Orozco also mentioned it, but Councilmember Guerrero asked about it as well. Just want to clarify on the staffing continuity plan. A lot has been discussed about it. I just want to say that it's meant to be a citywide policy. So whether it's like when Chris Rankin retired as city clerk, we had a major, loss there. We wanted to bring someone on to be able to cross train. So this would formalize a practice that we have utilized in the past, but it's particularly important for our public safety departments and other departments that have, the need to maintain certain staffing levels to deliver services. And so it's something that it got brought up in the context of the reforms under the police department that we did in July to address specifically at that time the issue of having officer positions that can go vacant, and then it takes a long time, as was mentioned, to put someone through the academy, train them, and get them out in the field. So it's mainly meant for that type of situation, but also other departments in the city would be able to utilize it. The main way to pay for it is off of cost savings from those vacant positions, but the reserve is established in case we don't have that opportunity, and we would draw on that only in the situation where there's not departmental level cost savings for it. So just to clarify, it's a citywide policy for every department. I think I heard a question about, are we leasing or purchasing rec center equipment? I know Tracy's on here. Did you want to clarify on that? There she is.
Sure, yes, we do have a proposal to lease a portion of our equipment. Not all of it needs to be replaced, but many pieces of equipment do. They're over 10 years old. The industry trend is to lease equipment because equipment doesn't last very long and is changing very quickly and is very expensive to maintain. So this allows us to replace our equipment on a more regular basis to be competitive with other facilities and to follow industry trends, and also provides more certainty with the maintenance and replacement of equipment.
And then I think there was a question about the police records management system. If we had any detail about that, Roberta, I know probably has that.
Well, I tried. It's the WatchGuard video cloud storage for the body camera videos. We do believe it's the same as what Sacramento is using, but we would just need to confirm. We don't have that available at the moment. So I can certainly follow up, but we do believe it's the same. Yeah, Chief Strange, do you know?
Different system vendor, WatchGuard versus Axon, but it is a very similar approach with cloud storage and the same type of access throughout the criminal justice system.
I believe that was it in terms of the direct questions, but if we missed anything, let us know.
All right, further discussion? Councilmember Guerrero, do you still have your hand up, or?
No, sorry.
Oh, good. All right. Then with that, we have the item before us. And on this one, we do not, we have additional changes, Mr. Laurel?
Yeah, Roberta, if you don't mind, there was a memo. It was something minor.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So they're contained in the they're contained in the memo that was transmitted by the city clerk and the city manager. Okay. All right. So then, if there's not further discussion, is there a motion then on the item with those? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and make the move the recommended actions.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Ledesma, seconded by Councilmember Orozco. Seeing no further discussion, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Ledesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Aye.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
And Mayor Cabaldan.
Aye. All right, that motion carries. Congratulations and thank you to everyone that worked on this, which is everyone, particularly the subcommittee and the finance department. All right, that brings us to item 24, which is consideration of resolution 20-99 of the City Council of the City of West Sacramento establishing a budget appropriation of up to $808,351 from Measure E Fund, a budget appropriation of $602,874 from Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Funds, a budget appropriation of $600,000 from the Community Development Block Grant Program Income Funds, and a budget appropriation of $638,775 from the Yolo County Coronavirus Relief Fund for real property acquisitions for the Home Key program to provide interim housing for individuals experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, and delegating authority to the city manager to execute the county subaward agreement with Yolo County for a one-time award of $638,775 of coronavirus relief funds and to execute purchase and sale agreements for the acquisition of the Roadway Inn and the Flamingo Motel. Katie, does anything else need to be said?
And maybe have a glass of water after saying all that, Mr. Mayor.
All right, welcome, Ms. Yancey.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. in light of the hour and Roberta's presentation on our budget, I'll try to be as brief as possible given that title of what we're asking for you to consider this evening. So on August 5th, the council adopted 2 resolutions, Resolution 20-82 and 20-83. These resolutions authorized the city to submit 4 Project Home Key applications. These would provide funding for the city to acquire up to 4 motels. And in addition, the council also approved funding out of Measure E to permit us to do some pre-offer and pre-award due diligence activities. So we have been busy doing that for the past 15 weeks. Staff has been very fruitful in their efforts. And the staff report contains sort of the details of all of the work that we've been doing to prepare for Project Home Key, Project Room Key, Home Key. I'm so sorry, they need to think of different names. A Project Home Key award from the state through the HCD programs. So staff has conducted these various activities, and we have been looking to do these under an extremely expedited schedule. The Project Home Key expires and extinguishes all funding eligibility as of the end of the year, except for some ongoing subsidies. And so we've been working under an extremely compressed schedule. To that end, very recent developments related to the city's Home Key Award program and the state's other efforts to house individuals and families experiencing homelessness or are near experiencing homelessness during this pandemic, which is known as Project Room Key, have further informed the process that we commenced 15 weeks ago in August. So staff has submitted an errata memo to council that summarizes these very recent developments, that also includes a new recommendation for the action items that are included in the staff report. So staff is respectfully requesting that the city council substitute all of the recommended actions in the staff report with those that are contained in the errata memo. In summary, the most prominent of those changes is to remove item number 4, which is delegating authority to the city manager to purchase the Flamingo Motel. Staff is no longer recommending that this be a motel that the city council considers for acquisition due to the items that were described in the errata memo. I'm just going to summarize for the council what the new recommended action items are, which include a change to Resolution 20-99 and the appropriation for Measure E. So therefore, recommended item number 1 would remove the Flamingo from the CEQA action, and the CEQA action would only be for the roadway in. There's no change to number 2, which is allowing the city manager to execute the county sub award for the CARES Act in the amount of $638,775. There would be a change to item number 3, which is Resolution 20-99. We're asking the city council to increase the $808,351 allocated out of Measure E to an amount of $2,274,359,000. That would account for an additional cost that's not to be covered at this time by the Home Key Award of $2,058,351, and to also include $10,000 in closing costs, $40,000 for interim property management, social services, and security, $50,000 for rehabilitation, construction management costs, and $116,008 for the roadway rehabilitation. These costs are just minor modifications to the costs that are included in the budget impact section. We removed the costs that we're associating with the Flamingo in light of our recommendation to remove that from council's consideration. We are also having action 5 now become action 4. So that would be unchanged. That would delegate authority to the city manager to execute the purchase and sale agreement in the amount of $6.7 million for the roadway end. And then action 6 would now become action 5. I just wanted to provide some comments here. We're not changing this action, but we thought in light of the breadth of authority that we're asking the council to give the city manager, given this compressed schedule and the fiscal impacts of not moving quickly, we wanted to articulate for the city council in greater detail the numerous number of activities that we're actually asking that are described in the staff report to be approved under this particular recommended action. So in addition to the existing language, we are adding Activities in this 90-day window include, but are not limited to, the following: contracting and solicitation activities, executing a contract amendment with Thurman Consulting for construction management services, hereby extending their contract 60 days and increasing their total compensation to $100,000, executing interim property management and operation contracts, executing interim lease agreements for on-site operator and security, rehabilitation construction contracts in the amount not to exceed $116,008, the waiving of the competitive bid process for these repairs in light of the fact that HCD will not reimburse our costs if they are incurred, invoiced and paid after December 31st. They are only eligible for reimbursement if we submit them by the end of the year. And if we had to do a typical competitive cost, we would not be able to get reimbursed for this $116,008. And we are also asking for the city manager to have the authority to enter into an interim social services contract with Yolo County to continue the wraparound social services for the current room key participants, which will become home key participants if the council approves the acquisition after we close, and to execute the standard agreement with HCD upon the execution of the purchase and sale agreement so that we can receive our home key award, have it deposited into escrow, and close escrow on or around December 2nd, which is 6 business days from now. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions. I thank you for letting me walk you through these complicated recommended actions this evening.
All right, thanks, Katie. And I think we can all tell you're ready to get to bed and get up in the morning and start getting to the recorder's office and do all file forms. Appreciate and you're very much deserve and have earned the moment of a little bit of giddiness that we can detect, and also just sheer anxiety about just getting this across the line. So I know you felt that way all the way through, and so have we. So are there questions for staff from members of the council? Councilmember Orozco. Councilmember Guerrero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the staff for all the work they've put into making this happen. I know this, a lot of other cities, counties struggled in getting to where we're at today here. Creativity, knowledge on being able to purchase as far as housing and your relationships with housing and community development. And just the fact that this is a strong passion and belief that this is the right thing to do here in West Sacramento. For all of you that have been pretty dedicated in making this happen. So I greatly appreciate the advocacy work that the mayor had to get us to a great deal of what we're at today. Just really proud, this is a project that I worked on behalf of Los Angeles County with the coalition that was both northern and southern, jurisdictions, local jurisdictions that wanted to do more than just temporarily house individuals, but find permanent housing. And it started off with a $2 billion request in January, and then coronavirus hit. And with the coronavirus relief funding, this gave us an opportunity to really dedicate funding for permanent housing, and to see that we're making it happen here in West Sacramento. Just really grateful, proud of our city, getting to where we're at today. And just also the labor of love from all of our partners, Children's Alliance and Mercy Coalition, volunteers who, delivered, meals, our Rotary Club delivered meals, and just a lot of people who went out of their way to provide additional support to the guests in the motels. And so it's been a long, few months, and this is, the shining light of, getting through a pandemic and very hard times, but a lot of people found it in their hearts to make things happen like this. So just want to show, my gratitude and appreciation, and also make a motion for it to pass.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Guerrero. Councilmember Orozco.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, my hand was up for the previous item, but I too am really excited about this, and I've said so before that there are many things that we have done in this city that make me proud to not only live here but to serve here. This is one of them. The potential for impacting people's lives through this action is immeasurable. And I know we have Mark Sawyer here on the phone, well, it says iPhone, but we have him here on the call tonight. And Mark has dedicated, pretty much the equivalent of years of sweat equity into this effort. And as I mentioned before, when you get an 8-year-old little boy that's making bean burritos for the residents of the roadway, and that it is it's an impactful effort. We have folks that are the worst, they're in the worst case scenario, the best, their lives are really impacted by COVID, more so than a lot of us. And they have taken temporary housing with the roadway, and through our efforts as a city, along with, the funding that we've received to support this, and the efforts of, like as Councilmember Guerrero mentioned, the Yolo County Children's Alliance, who has been handling the case services. I'm really proud of that organization. But also, Mark, who knows those residents, who has vetted the residents, who can tell you what everyone is going through and what kind of supports they need. I'm really grateful that we can have a project that can at least hopefully temporarily house folks who will move into our permanent supportive housing unit, something that we've been long awaiting. So thank you so much to our staff who has worked on this. And thank you, Katie, for presenting us. I'm too giddy as well. So it's a good night. And I also am fully supportive.
Pro Tem Sandine.
I'd like to share my gratitude as well. And I know the action tonight that we'll take, there means that, as the mayor said, there's work that starts tomorrow to drive this over the finish line. So it's exciting, but I know there's a lot of work still ahead, but I'm incredibly grateful. This has been very complicated. We've had to turn on a dime and be pushy and make requests and try to get this going, but has been shared by my colleagues. This is really needed and will be huge for us.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is what we do, and I really can't express the thanks to the staff, everyone, Mark, Katie, everyone that's been involved in this, Aaron too, and on pulling this together, and the ups and downs we've gone through the last few months of this, and weeks, and down to the days, and now we got 6 more days. Is that right, Katie? 6 more days. Good grief. So I don't want to delay this anymore, but I'm so proud of the culture City Hall has and we have to kind of go make these things happen, and that's the way we should be. So I don't know if we had an official second. I think Councilman Guerrero was the motion. I'll second in support of this.
All right. And maybe Raul's gone to bed because he hasn't popped on even for a quick second on this item, but I know we all appreciate his work on this as well. There he is, summoned by the sound of his voice. Yeah, thanks to the whole team. I also want to thank the governor for his bold strokes on both room key and then home key. Those were not natural programs for the state to move forward with, and his investment and then sticking with and supporting with that effort, not just for the short term, but to find a way to make lives better in the long term, even past the pandemic in a substantial and significant way. And then of course, choosing West Sacramento to highlight both programs. Was an extraordinary vote of confidence in the work that we're doing as a community along both of those lines. It wouldn't be West Sacramento if this were only a project that was going to be providing much needed housing to provide shelter and supports for folks who are experiencing homelessness. That would be, there are a handful of other cities that are doing that, but this is that, and then it is also central to our ambition since we incorporated in 1986 to create a downtown, and for so many decades, it has been a priority of the city, to be sure, but of the people of the community to convert more and more of the motels that were marooned after the construction of the freeway to other uses that will support the kind of downtown that is in the West Capitol Avenue Action Plan, is in the general plan, has been the result of every single public workshop we've ever. And this is that's hard work. You know, I know my colleagues also probably hear this from residents all the time. Why don't you do more of this? Why don't you do this every week? And it's hard. It's expensive and complicated, and it's expensive, and it's expensive, and it's expensive. And we are only here because of the home key and room key programs that have made this at all possible. But in addition to advancing our key policy goals around homelessness and our key policy goals around these specific individuals who we've been serving and sheltering during room key, having the capacity to transition through home key as well, is absolutely essential. But so is this contributing to the long-term vision of the community to build on what we already did with the construction of City Hall and the library and the community center and the theater and the black box and everything else about creating a new downtown, a new heart of West Sacramento. And this is a big part of that. And also supporting, since she's here, it's required to say it, also supporting just down the street, the Grand Gateway transformation and its linkage to the waterfront to bring the downtown and the waterfront together. All of these pieces come together, and you can see the expertise and the sweat that's been put into all of those projects coming alive here. Right? We didn't have 5 brand new staffers working on this project. We had folks who had written 1 million grant proposals, who had done 27 property negotiations, who knew what was underneath the ground here, who knew the people that we're trying to serve, right? And so everything that's been said about our staff team and their hard work and it's all true, but also that just the on the ground experience with this place and these people has made a huge difference in making possible something that, I'll be honest now with members of the public, this project died 17 times along the way. And I probably missed 12 of the other times that it died. These are incredibly hard to pull off, incredibly hard. It's one of the reasons why we're one of the only cities in the state that has won one of these awards. They're incredibly hard to pull off, but so worth it. And so I'm really proud of the work, and I'm looking forward to bringing it to conclusion as well. Just to tie it back to our last item, just real briefly, the reason why we're able to do this, the only reason we could even contemplate voting on an appropriation of between $800,000 and $2 million from Measure E is that we have sequestered our resources in order to make available opportunities like this. When a home key comes along, when a Obama stimulus comes along, when programs like this come along once in a generation sometimes, that we make sure that we have the resources in the bank to be able to take advantage of them and exploit them and leverage those monies into much more money than we could ever raise as a community on our own. And so it's also, as we've congratulated and thanked our staff and our partners, also to say thank you to the voters of West Sacramento who took the extraordinary step of enacting Measure E to provide resources that support the home run and road rehabilitation and everything else, but also give us a small but critical amount of money to make these kinds of opportunities become reality when it comes to combating homelessness and helping folks who are experiencing homelessness find a way out. So thanks to all. So with that, we have a motion on the floor and the second, and I believe everyone's, I don't see any further debates going. So why don't we ask the city clerk to please call the roll on the motion, which is on the staff revision of the recommended action on item 24. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Sandin.
Aye.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Aye.
And Mayor Cabalden.
Aye. All right, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Katie and Raul and Mark and the whole we'll look forward to getting the project done. All right, let's proceed to council calendar. Assistant City Manager Berlin.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Just a reminder that next Thursday and Fridays, our Thanksgiving holiday and our offices will be closed. But I did want to take a moment just to say a few things to Babs. I just really wanted to thank you so much for your service to the city. Your kindness and your appreciation towards staff and your insightful questions and comments and recommendations from the dais have just been so helpful to staff, and we just really appreciate the role you've played and the support you've showed to staff. So you will truly be missed on the council, but hopefully we'll get to see you and work with you in the future in other capacities. So best of luck. Thank you.
All right, any Councilmember Roscoe?
No, I have nothing further.
Okay, any questions for on the calendar? Seeing none, city manager reports?
Yeah, my only report is because it was left out of the previous comments. Let's not forget that Babs received the 2020 West Sacramento of the Year award from the Chamber of Commerce, which in 2020 says a whole lot, you know, and I think obviously she was most deserving of that. I was able to take part in the video presentation for Babs, so I'll just stand by what I put on tape, not to reiterate everything, but I will say though that what I said there, and it's been said tonight multiple times, she's just so appreciated by the staff. So speaking for myself and the 40-something people that were on this call earlier, just for everything Amanda said, just your thoughtfulness, your caring, always thank yous for the little stuff. It matters so much, and you all do that. And but Babs, ever since you were on the Planning Commission, it's been something that's it's just been appreciated, and we really miss you. I appreciate you. Just comforted by the fact that you're not leaving West Sacramento, and I know we'll have a chance to work together again. I didn't know about Cindy wanting to come back and sing, but we'll have a party when this is over, and we'll make sure that happens. So, and I did want to mention that staff put together a little video that's more like it's kind of like a highlight reel of Babs in action, and we were gonna share that on social media on our website. But we do have it if you know.
We'll take.
Very long. You want to? Okay, let's do it. Yeah, Yash, can you cue it up?
Right. Thank you so much. That got to be, sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's my report. Maybe Jeff has something to say.
And any questions on the city manager report? All right, thanks. Thank you. Thanks for that, Aaron and the whole team. City attorney reports.
I have no report. I will just add my thanks for all the years going back to Planning Commission and going forward from them. It's funny when you're advising the Planning Commission, you can sometimes tell those who are destined to move on. And it was pretty obvious with you that was where you were likely to go or where you could best serve. So I'm glad that happened. I wish you could stick around longer, but these things happen. So here we are. So congratulations and have a great time after all of this.
All right, staff direction from members of the council. We have no future agenda item requests. So is there a motion to adjourn? Perhaps adjourn in gratitude of Bab Sandine?
I'll make that motion.
A second.
And hereby declare November 18th, Babs Sandine City Council meeting night. We love you, Babs.
Thank you.
All right, so it's been moved by Councilmember Roscoe and seconded by Councilmember Guerrero. Madam Clerk, please call the roll on the motion to adjourn.
Yes. Councilmember Guerrero.
Aye.
Councilmember Ledesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Orozco.
Aye.
And for the last time, Mayor Pro Tem Sandine.
Love you guys. Aye.
And Mayor Cabaldon.
Aye. All right, with that, the motion carries and the meeting is adjourned in expression of gratitude to Councilmember and Mayor Pro Tem Babs Sandine. Have a safe evening, everyone. Babs, thank you and best wishes. Good night.
Thanks, Babs.
Thank you.
Babs.
Good night.
Bye-bye.